Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast. Before we go any further, please hit that follow, subscribe, or rate the podcast if you're listening on Spotify. It's a key performance indicator for us and helps us reach even more people.
Man is affected not by things, but the views he takes of them. Therefore, if any be affected by reason of himself alone. It's not the events that cause you harm, it's your reactions to the events. If I'd have crashed my car on the way here today, but I was physically okay, but I came here and I was a gibbering wreck, it's not the crash that's caused that, it's my reaction to the crash. In our world, it boils down to that dichotomy of control. There's things that will be in your control or out of your control. And if you just boil it down to, Pete doesn't like me, okay, well that's out of my control, so I don't need to worry about it.
My guest on the podcast today is Stephen Harris, who is an experienced group commander and joined the fire service in 1992. He says he's loved every minute of it. Steve says the fire service made him, loved him, broke him, and helped rebuild him. He has many years of leading, designing, and delivering post-incident traumatic stress interventions in the UK Fire and Rescue Service.
If you see your 80-year life as an 80-mile road, okay, so it's in 80 sections, each section of that road is a year, and each section of that year is 365 days, that little problem, that person that's cut you up today is just a piece of gravel on that bit of that road. You go, why are you letting that affect you today? Because it's literally that blip in your life.
Steve is a husband and a father and author of his blog Leading Into the Fire, which you can find in the notes for this podcast, and also works on resilience in both emergency services and corporate clients through public speaking and motivational events. Thanks for coming back to the podcast, and I hope you enjoyed today's show.
Because what I've done for years is that sort of critical incident debriefing, post-incident diffusing, but that's essentially just asking people, how are you after that incident? Years ago, we used to ask them, oh, Pete, tell me what you did at that incident, and we'd piece it together as a group of people. Yeah. But we slowly learned over the time that why would I make you relive something that you dealt with 4 days ago?
Okay.
Rather than just go, well, where are you today? What's affecting you today?
So rather than like taking them back to the beginning of the road and dragging them down like after a car or fall off a bike, I'm going to take you back there and let me just drag you down the road and every time you're like, oh God, you're going over that scab again. Ooh.
Essentially, yeah, and it was based on Jeffrey Mitchell's critical incident stress management, I think it was called. They built it years ago and we used it for years in our fire service. But overusing it and seeing the reactions of people, I'm like, exactly that. But Steve, why are you asking me about that car crash I went to 4 days ago? I thought it was all right till I spoke to you again.
Because there's an extent as well to which the mind can't actually tell the difference between what's happening and what... It's the concept of a nightmare, isn't it? Yeah. You wake up in the middle of the night, you're physically manifesting the reaction to the thing. You're sweating, your heart rate is elevated, you feel anxious, and it might affect your whole day. You're like, how are you doing? Oh, I had a terrible nightmare last night. And your body can't tell the difference between reality and not. Sorry, your mind can't. So, yeah, I suppose when we try and... If we go into too much depth when we're re-going over that trauma, you're effectively just traumatizing somebody. Equally, if you told a child a horrific story, the kid wasn't there. But you could still traumatize them by telling them something fairly horrific.
Yeah, and I mean, we'll come on to that as well. I've had those chats with my wife. One of my blogs is about... I think I called it Hollywood Wives or something.
Yes, I remember that one about 5 months ago.
Yeah, where essentially I was talking to my wife, and I try not to tell her too much about incidents I've been to or my son, but you naturally do. But she has a totally different mental image of incidents we've been to what we've actually been to. Yeah.
But you've only got half the picture, haven't you, when you're hearing somebody? Yeah. And you're creating that. That's the beauty of a book, isn't it? Or even just a podcast. People can imagine what you're talking about, and you are adding layers of paint to their own imagination. But at the end of the day, they will have a different picture to you.
Absolutely. And I described one to her recently where we'd gone to a guy, unfortunately, had a cardiac arrest, rammed his car into a tree. And we went to it because we thought it was an RTC, it was just a cardiac event. And I described it to my wife, and it's near where we live. And then the one day we were driving, I went, that's the tree that I was on about. And she had the tree in a totally different place. It was a bigger tree, it was the other side of the road. Yeah. So it just goes to show, you can tell your wives, your partners, husbands, what you've been to, but they'll imagine something entirely different. And therefore they'll imagine what you saw, heard, smelled, touched, tasted entirely different.
I love that. Have you done the game where you sit back to back and draw the thing?
Oh, probably a long time ago.
Yeah, the odd leadership game or team building, when you do those sort of days where I have an image, you sit back to back, and I have to describe the image in front of me and you have to draw it. And that in itself is a wonderful way for people to try and expand the way they talk and really come at something right from zoomed out. Because people start and go, right, draw a line. And they've drawn it in the middle of the damn page. And all of a sudden you run out of space to draw the rest of it because where their focus was and all that, and it really brings an interesting side to it. Stephen Harris, welcome to
Hello.
the Firefighters podcast. How you doing, brother? I was so fascinated to get you in. You recently reached out, and I know you've started running your own podcast now. For people that are unaware, give us a quick whistle-stop tour before we get into everything about how you find yourself sat here today and everything you've been involved in.
Yeah, so Steve Harris, 29 years in the fire service. I'll retire later this year, 30 years, and I'm sure you'll ask me about that in a bit.
Yes.
Looking forward to retiring.
That won't be the longest of careers when we get into where we're heading to in the services. I think I'm going to cap out at 50-something years, but anyway, we digress.
Absolutely. 29 years in the fire service. I'm now a group commander in a metropolitan brigade. I was on the fire engines for 14 years, and the sort of journey I've been on around what we talk about today, around Stoicism and people's well-being. I was on a fire engine that crashed in 1996, and that led me down a road of, I turned into a terrible passenger. I had lots of issues with riding on a fire engine, ended up having CBT, got into diffusing and debriefing, and I've slowly sort of integrated myself into that world. Been through lots of other things, life things. Was off sick again a few years ago, off sick with stress, anxiety, depression. So it was around that time I really got into reading around Stoicism. A few books led me down a route of things, and listened to a load of podcasts, saw yours and thought, during lockdown, I'll email him. Does he want me on as a guest? And you said yes.
100%, yeah. Because I this is like an example of professional, personal, private coaching, professional development, everything for me, because... And that's kind of where this whole thing came from, because I thought, God, there must be more people who have an interest in this sort of thing than just me. But unless we're doing what we do right now, people are never going to be able to benefit from the hours and hours and hours of people such as yourself who have gone away and looked at this sort of stuff in depth. And also, we don't want people to have to go through similar things to be able to learn the lessons. We're going to go in so many directions today. I wanted us to start, if we could. There's so many fascinating things on your blog, and I love how some of the sort of headlines for it force you to, and that's what I found some of them so intriguing. So start us off with frozen broccoli and social connectedness. I know this sounds like nothing like what we're going to go into, but there's an awesome thread that runs through all of this.
Yeah, there is, and you'll find most of my blog titles are one word or a strange title that ends up not being anything to do with the content of the blog. It's to try and drag you in. So when we started lockdown, we all had to start working at home. So I was reading a book at the time by Johan Hari called, I think it's called Lost Connections.
Lost Connections.
Yeah.
Great book. I love that.
I've just brought it again to actually read it. I brought it in paper this time.
Yeah.
But, so I started...
It wasn't his first one though, was it? He did a book before that,
I've just read
Chasing the Scream.
Chasing the Scream, I've just read that as well.
Great book.
Absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
But I started... We were all on Teams, so I put a Teams invite in our diaries for the whole of our fire service every Tuesday and Thursday, just for an hour. And I said, let's all just get together on Teams and we'll just chat nonsense. I might have used a slightly different phrase to that, but we just chat nonsense. And we started up...
That's a big thing to do. Let's just pause for a second on that. What gave you the audacity to think that was okay? Because I do stuff like that, and that's how I'm no longer allowed to email my entire brigade. They've taken that message all function off my email account.
I didn't ask permission. I knew our brigade... Yeah, I sort of knew our brigade would be up for it.
Okay.
We had like a COVID Teams channel, so I just put on there, look... I'm going to be here 1 hour on a Tuesday and a Thursday. I'll put it around 12:30. It's people's lunchtime, and said, look, if you're missing that social connectedness at headquarters where you sit in the bistro and have a chat, let's do it online. Yeah. It might work, it might not work. We're still doing it now. We might only have 2 or 3 regulars now, and I've missed a few, but I try and be there as much as I can.
You're still doing it now?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And there was me and one lady the other day, that was it. But we were just chatting about, I don't even know what we were chatting about. I can't remember, holidays and Darren Brown and things like that we were talking about.
Darren Brown's
so
great.
She'll know, if she listens to this, she'll know what it is now. So the idea was just, it was a little bit selfish, thinking, I miss people. I thrive in my business by going around and talking to people face to face. So it's great to talk to you face to face rather than over a phone.
Well, we're social animals as well. We're chemically designed to have that, and people's one of the biggest
which is what Johan Hari talks about in Lost Connections. You know, some of the roots of depression is because we haven't got that social connectedness.
100%.
I read another book about the history of seeing how inventions have changed the world, and she talks about how fire led us to be social animals because it allowed us the time to socialise around a fire rather than hunting and gathering. So all that, my brain's all over the place. I was like, right, let's just have an hour, a Tuesday and a Thursday, where we chat rubbish.
Do you feel like, when you read all of those things, do you feel like it's a wave that pushes you towards, and you're like, I'm not quite sure where all of this is going, but I feel this overwhelming you're drawn to this. And sometimes I find it even hard, ironically, over a podcast, so I find it hard to articulate it. But I'm just like, there's a need for this. And kind of like you, because I know you've got your own podcast, I don't know if somebody's already trying to say this, and I want to say it, and I think it needs to be said, and I don't know if I'm going to say it right. But you feel a calling towards being part of something like that. But it's a bold thing to step forward and say, I'm going to start doing this thing.
Yeah, 100%. And it was good fun. And Frozen Broccoli, we had a hardcore of about 7 or 8 of us. And as it turned out, it was mainly non-uniform people that were dialing in that I had already known. And about 7 or 8, 9 of us, they all started to learn more about each other. So we learned about each other's family, because we tried not to talk work. I said, let's talk as if we're in the bistro just chatting nonsense. Yeah. So we got onto all kinds of subjects. I mean, real wide-ranging subjects. I think I hosted a couple of retirement dues for people virtually.
That's great.
We had people dial in. And Frozen Broccoli, from what I remember, and I'm sure she'll tell me if I got it wrong, I'm sure the one lady, she had an argument with her husband or a partner over frozen broccoli. Because I think he should have gone out and got frozen sprouts, and he got frozen broccoli.
Yeah.
And it was just something as silly as that. But so the idea, because I don't think she'd ever read my blog, and I said, right, I'm going to title one for you, make you read it. So the reason it's frozen broccoli is nothing really to do with the content.
Yeah.
But the whole thing is about talking, which is what the diffusing and debriefing is about. Let's talk about how you're feeling. If you're feeling a bit crap because you've been to an incident, let's talk about it. Let's normalise it. It is as simple as that. The back of your T-shirt says it's okay not to be okay.
I forgot I was wearing that one today. Yeah.
That's what we do.
Yeah.
Try and I've lived most of my career by putting my hand up and going, I'm not very well today. I don't feel okay. So that's that living by example.
And like you say, when somebody verbalises that, it's often more common than they believe it. It's a little bit like when you sit in a room and the person presenting is spitting out a load of mnemonics, and you kind of go, what does that mean? And everyone go, I'm glad you asked that, because I ain't got a clue. And like everyone else might be sitting around with that still rabbit in their headlights adrenaline from an event and go, God, I hope somebody says something about that flipping arm that was hanging out the window, because I can't seem to stop thinking about it. And just normalising that. You said something fantastic there about social connectedness. And I wanted to just sort of double click on that, and how the fact that you said a lot of, not everyone, but the majority were non-uniformed personnel. Now, more and more in the fire services and emergency services as a whole, we're privatising some of it, but also we're recognising that the greater skill sets that we need exist outside of the operational capacity, because we're trained in operations, and somebody might have a specialism in law or IT or whatever, communications. Bringing those people into the service, they have not been able to benefit from the culture of the emergency services and the round the watch table life. So when you say that it was mostly non-uniform personnel, I feel like that's a fantastic example of it. How much of a void do you think there is between operational personnel that take for granted, maybe, I don't say harshly, but we take for granted that in fact we've got constant support, we're always in a team of 4 at least,
Well, I think COVID created that void, and that was one of the reasons. Watches were still going in to man the fire engines, they were still on duty as a watch, so they could come back despite us all being locked down. They were locked down on the station in between incidents, so they were still there chatting. The idea of our staff at headquarters is everybody was working at home. We weren't allowed in anywhere. So people were literally sat in a room on their own, maybe just with their cat or without anything for a day. So they missed that, even if it's a 2-minute chat at the breakout area to make a coffee, they weren't getting it. Their partner could have been out to work all day, so they weren't getting that. And people were working, teams became back-to-back meetings. There was no 5-minute coffee break between meetings. They were back-to-back. So that my idea was, let's just put an hour stopgap in twice a week where you just come and we chat nonsense, you have a coffee, and we recreate that passing conversation in headquarters, that passing conversation in the corridor. So it was just to recreate some sort of connectedness that wasn't, why haven't you done that today? Or when's your next meeting type thing.
Because you hear in a lot of Zoom meetings and stuff like that, people use this, can we take that offline, Steve? Or can we we want to be efficient. We want to be efficient with our time. Time is the one irredeemable asset. But those tiny nuggets of social inclusion, of interaction, of feeling heard, of feeling like somebody cares what you think, are so valuable. And if that's all you have, use an example of somebody stuck at home with a cat or whatever. So you might go, dude, that's like a 20-second conversation. What's that? Well, it's because you're sitting with a team of 4 all day, or you've got children and a wife or a husband. This person may have none of that, and this may be their everything. So if that's their everything and you're taking away their everything, it's not hard to recognise that that's going to have a massive effect on them.
No, it's not. And we tried. My idea was, like I say, it was a bit selfish. I was sat in my own bedroom. My wife was at home because she was working in school, but she was off a little bit. So my son come back from uni. So I had people in my house, but I had to go and sit in the spare bedroom and work. And then work became home and home became work. So it was, I was like...
Did you get changed? Not like you didn't sit there in your PJs, but, or maybe you did, I don't know. But no, some people had... how were you able to... Because I had to have like a thing, like I would go and exercise and then I would change gears and I was bang in work mode.
Yeah, so before lockdown, I used to go to the gym most mornings and then come home, get changed, drive into work. So during lockdown, I started running so that I still recreated that exercise, come home, shower, go in the bedroom, start working. But then it was try to physically, after a day's work, shut that small bedroom.
It's hard to have those bookends, isn't it?
Yeah, that's why we sort of we changed the house around a little bit. Go sit in that spare bedroom so I can shut the door and work's finished now.
Yeah.
Because I was a strong believer in turn my phone off at 6 o'clock. Because work's over. I've got a work phone and a personal phone for that very reason.
Absolutely.
But yeah, the social connectors. I think the fact that it was a lot of non-uniformed is because they just didn't have their colleagues to talk to. They didn't have a 5-minute chat making a cup of tea.
No.
Because it was, I've got to go, I've got another meeting in 5 minutes, I've just got time to make a drink.
Yeah.
Well, in an office environment, that would be, how you doing?
Yeah.
That's the bit they were missing. Even if it's a toilet conversation or whatever, it wasn't there.
Have you read some of the Google studies and stuff like that about how they strategically place water fountains, drink stations effectively at different places, and then some of the social studies about the corridor and where you position key members of staff in a corridor so that people have to pass their door. So it gives me an excuse to, I'm going to walk past Steve's door. Steve, have you got 2 minutes? Do you know what I mean? Otherwise, if you're in an isolated place right in the corner, everybody knows I'm going to see you in the corner. And I've got to walk all the way there to see you. And there's a whole small habits, marginal gains thing there that really, they're like the little tiny little cobwebs that stops people working in silos.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I haven't read them, but I mean, a lot of how I operated at headquarters was if I wanted something from you at headquarters, I'd just come to stand by your desk and have a chat. So I created a lot of social connections for myself as well as other people. So I think when I set this up, these twice a week, I had the trust of people to go, he's not doing this for any other reason than just he likes to talk to people.
Yeah.
So I got a lot from it myself because people were just chatting to me nonsense for an hour a day and I wasn't driving myself mad in other meetings. But it comes at a cost because there's an hour of your day that you've devoted time to people, so you've got to make that up somewhere, but it's worth the cost. It's always worth the cost.
Yeah, it's a big investment, but I always say every single interaction you're adding weight to one end of the scale. You're adding weight to the trust and benefit of that relationship, or you can do damage with it. And equally, you don't look at things in isolation. Like you say, I'll pop over to someone's desk and ask them. If I said to you, have you asked Jim if he can help on this project next week? So yeah, I've asked him. How did you ask him? Did you ring him? Did you send him an email? Did you go and see him? Because you'll just go, I asked him. What are you on about? I asked him. Did you go and see him? Yeah, because people, what's the difference? Why are you getting stupid? It's very different. It shows you have invested time. You've got up. You're present with me. All of these non-verbals, you're present with me. That's massive. And people can't look at those things in isolation. Go, I sent him an email and go back to me. Oh, okay.
Well, it is, and I think COVID and Teams especially has gotten it just become business. I find somebody rings me on Teams because they want something from me. They don't walk past my desk and go, "Hey Steve, how you doing?" And then 2 minutes later go, "Oh, while I'm here, can you do this for me?" It's pure business. So it's taken away a lot of that interaction.
It becomes only exchange.
It does.
You don't get the bits around the side of it.
Today's episode was brought to you by the folks over at Willingwood Watches. Now, in their continued support of the Firefighters charity, they are bringing you the Always Ready motorcycle. This is done in conjunction with Soul Time Motorcycles, and there is only 300 tickets available for you to be part of this. Now, Willingwood Watches, as you already know, are the creators of those beautiful handcrafted timepieces made with authentic, upcycled firefighting equipment. Willingwood Watches have partnered with Soul Time Motorcycles that are based in Scotland to create the world's first Willingwood motorcycle. This is actually incorporating many of the workings of their watches and is adorned with multiple pieces of upcycled firefighting materials, from the seat to the handlebars to stuff on the fuel tank. It looks absolutely incredible. And you can be in with a chance to win this, but there's only 300 tickets. So if you go in the notes of this podcast below, you will see how you can register for it. Now, don't worry if you're thinking that you'd love to enter, but you don't know how to ride the bike. Soul Time Motorcycles have got the answer for that. The winning ticket holder can claim free riding lessons and practical instruction on it. Now, whether you're into motorcycles or not, please head over to WilliamWatches.com, where you will see the most beautiful firefighting inspired watches, from the Triumph to the Valiant to the Bronze to the Chivalrous and the Amethyst Anniversary watch, which came out earlier this year. William Watch is a long-standing partner of the podcast, so please go on, head over and check them out. Now back to the show.
Now, a lot of what you were most passionate about when we first had our discussions, and I know there's a wide-ranging experience, we could go so many directions with it, was this subject of Stoicism, and how you've it's either given you different perspectives or how you've drawn a lot of benefit from it, as I personally have as well. When did that first trigger within you? You said reflections after you'd had these incidents at work.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. You know, I've been doing this debriefing for years. We took a team to Warwickshire after the sad death of the 4 firefighters in Atherstone.
Yes.
Just after Grenfell, we were invited down to support some of the firefighters from Grenfell, and that turned into something I didn't expect it to be. There was 4 of us that went down. Yeah, and Grenfell was tragic on every level, and London tried their absolute best to look after their firefighters, and we ended up in a world of lots of firefighters were called back in, and they were having like an almost mandatory counselling session, and the 4 of us ended up in a room just facilitating making cups of tea for these firefighters that come in. Okay. And I ended up in some deep conversations there, probably out of control of how I would have normally have controlled the debrief. And I didn't know at the time. There was lots of other stuff going on in my life. Work was really busy, that it started to affect me. But I suppose I was just hiding it. And this was around, 2017, 2018. But that year was massive. I had a dear friend commit suicide. My son was about to go to university. So I had all these things going on. And then it was the day my friend committed suicide, my body broke, and I was like, you know, my first reaction was, it was like 6:30 in the morning. I said to my wife, in absolute bits, I've got to go to work, I've got a meeting to go to. And you're like, hang on a minute, something's not quite right there.
Perspective's funny there, isn't it?
First thought is, go to a meeting. So,
because it gives you a purpose, though. And this is exactly a strange thing, like when you said I was down there in London facilitating these things, and it's a very poignant thing about emergency services is there's a weird detachment, and that's what's kind of like a bit of a trick when members of the public go, oh, Steve, couldn't do what you do for a living. And you go, I'm not really doing that. I'm not standing at the side of the road staring at the thing. I'm not stood next to Grenfell I'm there with a function to do, and the function allows me an element of detachment because my focus isn't on the thing, it's what I need to do. And you were there serving others. Yeah. You weren't there you were there experiencing trauma, but you didn't know you were because it's that subconscious onboarding, I suppose. Yeah, it became, I just took on someone else's trauma, you know, and I could explain who he was and what he did at Grenfell, but I won't because it's not. Of course. I always said to people, it's not my story to tell, it was his story. Love it. But we talked about it earlier, it almost became my story, the emotions of it. And it was only the death of my friend that made me go, right, you got to stop now. I think I was probably close to some sort of mental burnout. Absolutely was. Went down this road of stress, anxiety and depression. But I'd already been reading quite a lot of stuff before that. And I started to read either before that or just after that. It's probably before that. I read, I like Darren Brown, so I was reading a lot of Darren Brown's book, his book called Happy. Yep. He really explores Stoicism. He's so articulate, isn't he? He is, yeah. He's like honey to listen to. But he really explores Stoicism. Yeah. And it got me, and I read something and I go, I'm going to read that now. So I started reading about CPT. But he said a lot about Epictetus, one of the great Stoics. And the one phrase that stuck in my head, and I repeat to people a lot, is man is affected not by things, but the views he takes of them. Therefore, if any be affected by reason of himself alone. Essentially, he's saying, it's not the events that cause you harm, it's your reactions to the events. Yeah. If I'd have crashed my car on the way here today, but I was physically okay, then but I came here and I was a gibbering wreck. It's not the crash that's caused that, it's my reaction to the crash. Yeah. And you start applying that to firefighting world. And then you read that Beck and Ellis, who sort of invented CBT, were heavily influenced by Stoicism. And you started joining all these... I don't want us to fall into acronyms, just expand very briefly on
cognitive behavioural therapy.
Cool. Yep.
So it started from something called rational emotive behavioural therapy, and then they sort of morphed it into cognitive behavioural therapy. Well, I had CBT after I was off sick, so everything started to make sense in my head. And I read deeper and deeper into Stoicism, and I can't recite all of it. No. But that Epictetus thing, and then you look at Marcus Aurelius' book called Meditations.
Meditations of Marcus Aurelius. Yeah.
And then you look at dichotomy. This
stuff is so old, though. Isn't it great? Where, and I always say about original thought, people say, it's rubbish. You know, there is no original thought. We've all onboarded a myriad of things. We've poured it into our own cocktail, and we have a variation, a reinterpretation of what their thoughts and purposes were, and they're molded with our own experiences. And that is such a good, because these things will just get repeated and repeated and repeated. And some people say, oh, you're just banging on about the same thing again and again. You're not, because it's always goes through a different filter and a different filter and a different filter.
Yeah, and I'm quite conscious sometimes that I do bang on a lot about Stoicism. A lot of my blogs, there's always some sort of Stoic element to it, but I always try and put a reason in. But then when I start,
but it's the same application of a different situation, and every time it just proves again and again and again. It's almost like we're talking about blood flow. Do you know what I mean? We could talk about the body in a bajillion different situations, and still at some point, if we wanted to, connect it back to the systems of the body. And this is the system of the mind, and how it is affected, and how you allow things to affect you. So it's never. I don't think I ever said too much.
No, and the more I read, and the more books you read a lot of leadership book, and you can see how they're linked back.
You see the thread, don't you? You got that.
Chimp paradox.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I gave the chimp paradox.
Steve Peters, great.
I used to manage a team, and the one guy, and he just would fly off the handle about anything. And I went, have a read of this. And he come back to me, Steve, I can't believe what that book's done to me. And road rage was one of his things. Yeah. And he's like, how do I know that the guy that's just cut me up is not rushing to the hospital to save their kid, or going to, organ donation or whatever? He said, and I'm getting angry about it. And so little things like that is linked back to, that's out of your control. That's Stoicism in action, isn't it?
Yeah.
Him driving like an idiot is out of my control. Let him drive like an idiot. How I react to that is in my control to do that.
But out of a sense of what was originally survival instinct, we fill in, we're blank fillers.
Yeah.
We fill in the blanks. We go, just said Steve's name 3 times, he hasn't responded to me. And my mind goes, he hates you. He's rude, he's ignorant, he doesn't like you, he's trying to embarrass you. He's purposely trying to make you look a fool. And that's just your inner mind trying to go, we need to avoid this because we need to stay safe. We don't lose face. If we lose face, we're out the tribe, we're out the community, we're dead. And it does that in a millisecond. And your mind's got to that extreme so quick. And the same with the driving analogy. You go, this person's dangerous, trying to kill me, they hate me, that's Hitler driving the car. And you're like, whoa.
Absolutely. And then it's trying to apply that to the firefighting world. So, and it's a massive leap sometimes. This dichotomy of control. These things over here are out of my control. So don't worry about them because they're not in my control.
Most things fall in that bucket.
What you think of me today is out of my control.
Yes.
So why should I worry about it?
Yeah.
And then what I think of you is in my control. So do that. And there's some blurred bits in the middle that are sometimes in, sometimes out. Those are the things that not necessarily worry about, but you might be able to influence. But it's a real black and white way of looking at things. And it's rock hard.
Yeah.
I've said to people sometimes, and I mean this in the way I say it, not belittling alcoholism, but being a Stoic is like being an alcoholic. You wake up every day thinking, well, I've got to try hard again today to be a Stoic. And not get angry at that person. And some days you win and some days you don't. You go, right.
Because you do need the natural chemicals within you that will trigger the fight against Stoicism, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And you need them.
Yep.
So you do need, and again, that speaks to the chimp paradox. You need the chimp. You do need the chimp, but you need to understand it, give it safe places to play, and things like that. That is always that, isn't it? And that's, I always talk like a daily shower. There is no end. It's a daily thing. It's a daily thing. We get up, we rinse, and then we go, I didn't quite there, make it there, or that self-reflection. Yeah,
and a lot of Stoics, it's journaling is a Stoic practice at the end of the day, and I don't do it. Like I say, I'm not the best Stoic in the world. I just try really hard. Yeah. Journaling every day, sitting down and reflecting on how you reacted to things today, reflecting on your decisions. They reckon for men in particular, journaling is a real good way to sort your brain out.
100%.
I'm sitting, I don't do it. I've got a journal. My wife.
I go through bouts of it.
My wife will listen to this. I go, "You've got a bloody journal that he don't write in." I've got some stuff written in there, but I try now and reflect on: did I react to that in the right way? Yeah.
I'll acknowledge a wonderful previous guest, a very recent guest, who actually sent me, and people, if they've listened, will know who I mean when I say it. He sent me something called the Monk Manual.
Okay.
Fantastic resource. Really lovely, simplistic, but it's a very nice book. I'll show you it before you leave. And that got me back into it. I'd fallen out of the habit for maybe 3 or 4 months, and that got me back into the swimming pool, because I think there's and the irony of us sitting here talking about it, when you start to realise some of these, what I would call fundamentals of how your inner cognition works, when you start to appreciate them, it's so hard not to go around screaming about it, not to try and tell everybody else. Yeah. But sometimes you can be so busy telling other people about it, you forget to practice. A bit like if you walk around trying to encourage everybody to stay fit and healthy, you don't have time to go to the gym.
Yeah, and I think that was the world I'd got into.
Yeah. You were using all these tools, you were supporting so many other people.
Exactly. I wasn't, I think one of your podcasts, somebody said earlier, it's okay to be selfish a little bit.
Oh, 100%.
Selfish is self-care.
Selfish. Yeah.
And I don't think I was doing enough of that self-care. I was there, I was everything to everyone. And it was only that year of events that was like, hang on a minute, how are you looking after yourself? And it took months of cognitive behavioural therapy, probably once a fortnight, just to find a way to put things in place. This conversation I had in London to move it cognitively in my brain over there and get to a place where I was like, okay, am I better? Who knows? My wife will tell you some days I am, some days I'm not. I try to be a better, more reflective person and try not to react to stuff. But as I say, some days you go, I didn't do so well today.
I always say to people, selfish is horrible how we've vilified the term, because, not to use an overused phrase, but you can't pour from an empty cup. You've got to have something to give to people. And also, you don't want to get to the point where you're lighting yourself on fire just to keep everybody else warm, because that's not sustainable. I've coached people for probably a decade, and after the first few years, I got into a very bad habit of just taking on more and more clients, because it gets into that capitalist, this is the smart thing to do in business, grow it, blah, 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 blah. And you just become less and less effective. You sleep less. You don't get a chance to do further study yourself. It's almost like you've picked up 3 tools and you're going to try and build a house, but you've only got enough tools to build the foundation, and you get people to a point where you can't go beyond yourself because you're not spending the time developing yourself. And that becomes the empty cup analogy. You've poured out everything you've got, and you're not being selfish enough, which is the smart thing, because you can only help people from a position of strength. And even using terms like strength, people go, oh, you see me stronger than somebody else, better than somebody else, eh? Yeah. No, you can't. You've got to be able to build your own fortress first before you can bring anybody inside to look after them. You can't do that. And I always find mums and stuff like this, and emergency services operators in general, are terrible for this, because I'll use mums as an example. They give and give and give, and they end up emotionally, financially, spiritually, physically ruined sometimes because it's just give.
Yeah, and I think that's a blue light thing, isn't it? I actively took some, after I'd been off sick and went back to work, I deliberately didn't do debriefing for quite some time. One, the organisation said, we don't think you're safe to do it, and I agreed. Okay. But also in my head, I was like, right.
Did that not trigger you at all?
I hated it for a little bit.
Well, just somebody said, I don't think you're safe to do that.
Somebody said, I don't think you're safe to do it, but I had to trust.
I'm amazing at it. I'm great at it.
Yeah, I knew I was good at it,
but
obviously. I had to trust that they were making that decision for the right reason. So I had to adjust my brain to go, right, you're not going to do that for a good 12 months. And once I'd made that decision, that was all right. I could do that self-care and focus on something, do a bit more reading and get mentally into a stronger place. And I do it again now.
To a similar analogy, I've had friends in the police service, armed response, and whenever they go through any form of trauma, they have their weapons taken off them. And that, I know some of them have really triggered them, because they're like, I'm fine. I'm dealing with this fine. I'm going to get a bloody pay cut. If I'm off too long, I'm never going to get them back. And it can feel very belittling for some people, but you can't see the picture when you're in the frame. It's so hard. Self-awareness is like trying to catch fog. It's so hard.
I mean, I read a research paper. It's around the military, and it's probably from Second World War era, maybe a little bit after, about soldiers who have been in the theatre of war. And their easy way of remembering it was, you wouldn't go back into the theatre of war till you'd had 3 hots and a cup. So 3 hot meals and a sleep.
Yeah.
And when you link that to...
I'm stealing that. 3 hots and a cup. That's a great analogy.
I'll send you the link to the paper, but it's essentially, Pete, you've been in this theatre of war, so we're not going to take your gun off you, but what we're going to say is go over there, have some rest, have some self-care, have some food, and then we'll let you back in.
Well, I think there's so many applications from that in some of the work I do with UKISAR, because that is just some of the stuff those teams are subjected to, as well as all the physiological aspects of cold and everything like that, before I digress. But no, I'm going to 100%, send me that.
Well, UKISAR is another one. I have known a couple of people at ISAR, and I've asked them, how do you do that debriefing after traumatic things?
Especially because you bomb burst back off to your other services. Exactly. And they go, you had I'm going to be horrible now, but you had little jolly Stephen, right, okay, back to work. Exactly. Your pile of work has not been done by anybody else, crack on. And you're like, I just need a bloody minute to process what I've just been through, just to be honest with you.
Exactly how do we do it? I've never really sort of understood how I started to do that. How do you do that group debrief to go, how is everybody? Are we all good?
A lot of reliance, and the team currently is growing significantly, and there's been a greater level of awareness on that. We have lent significantly on the services because the services, they are their operators fundamentally, and they have the infrastructure there. But you don't have the same, because there's so many levels of outside of comfort, and this, you use the example of war as a great analogy, because it's a bit like, so if you attacked me now in my home, I'm still in my home, so I'm not as, and that's horrible for anybody that's experienced it, I'm sure, but I'm not completely outside all of my levels. If we did it in the street, it's one level. If we did it outside the country, if I did it outside the country with nobody I know, and the levels of discomfort and insecurity will grow at every single level. I'm at a relative level of comfort here. There's a Staffordshire Bull Terrier sat over there, and I'm here with you. But like you said, when somebody's at war, they're taking so much out of their levels. And I think I don't fully understand it, but there's certainly an element of separation that happens, which makes it harder for people to process, I think.
Yeah, I mean, my only world, 29 years, is of seeing firefighters experience those things, and I know it was in one of your podcasts the other day. Touch wood, firefighters don't die that often nowadays, and we're not in as many life-threatening situations as we ever used to be. However,
they don't die from operational causes as much.
That's a good way of putting it. Yeah. However,
which is, I don't laugh in laughing sense, but the upsetting irony of that fact.
Yeah. However, the level of stress and misery and anxiety we see from the public or from being filmed doing our jobs or the stress of normal life when you come back from an incident has massively changed the way I think firefighters are affected by what they see.
100%.
And it's just, what we're trying to do is just sit down and go, okay, where are you today after 4 days after that incident? What's up?
I want to zoom back for a second, or jump back and double click on something you said, which I find really interesting, and I think it's something that a lot of emergency services operators will have their own way of dealing with, but perhaps they've never verbalized it, which is you said about sharing aspects with your partner and how you do that and how her interpretation is different to yours and whether or not it's healthy to. So there's one there, and I'm gonna bounce it with another question, which is the idea of empathy exhaustion and the fact that you do one thing in your operational life, both as a leader but also as a frontline operator who's also in charge on times of the front line, where you are sometimes required to be a bit more dictatorial, a bit more command presence, not always as accepted in the home. If you have great command presence in the kitchen, it's not always appreciated. How have you balanced that? How have you felt your partner has appreciated your ability or inability to balance that, and how have you done that?
You can't see me smiling on this podcast, but I know if my wife listens to this, she will have a different view, so I'll try and answer it from what she's told me, because this command and control phase of life is a pendulum. I'm expected to go out to a mate comes 10 and be in charge, direct you what to do, and we'll have tea and cakes afterwards and have a nice chat. And then I might come back to the office and I've got to be empathetic to my team, or I might go straight home because it's a Saturday afternoon and I have to come back and my son wants this done, or my wife, so we're going to the shop. So how have I balanced it? I don't know. I'm hoping I've learned over the years, but I would think, and my wife would back this up, that I probably am I like to be in charge of things, so I've had to temper that side of me back in the house and go, actually, it's okay. And that
is it that you like to be in charge of things, or because we kind of get conditioned when our thought process gets a result that we go, I've got good logic, my thought process works. Look at the result. I saved the life. We successfully did the project. We hit the metric. I'm good at doing things. Listen to me. That's it might be egotistical, but that's kind of what our internal mind is doing. And then at home we get presented with another problem. Whatever, we're going to the seaside at the weekend, or we're going to put up a fence. Right, it's ABC, 1, 2, 3. This is what we're going to do. You're going to do that task. Oh, I thought we were discussing it, Stephen. I didn't think.
No. I'm institutionalised into command and control. 100% agree. Not long after.
But you're conscious of it. A lot of people come subconscious. They're like, I don't think so.
I think when I was still off sick, I was in a coffee shop the one day, and an old lady fell down the stairs, cracked her head on the floor. And I just went into command and control, did some first aid, said to the girl, you bring the ambulance, do this, do that. And it was only afterwards I had to ring my wife and go, can you come and get me? Because I'd switched off from command and control back into this person who was ill 10 minutes
before.
And
you handed over to the paramedics when they got there, you checked with the owner of the restaurant or whatever, and that was just you. And impressive to everybody around you, and probably reassured them. Yeah. This guy's in control, he got it sorted.
But it gave me a wobble because I wasn't very well. And I still do that now. You can take command and control. We had a family... Over Christmas, we had a family thing, and I was straight into command and control. Like, you go and do that. You find them. You drive there. I'll do this. I'll do that. And it's only after I'm like, that was Steve, the ops commander, just doing pointing and directing and shouting and telling people to do stuff.
Yeah.
So it's a natural behaviour that you've got to temper when you get home and go, yeah, you want to do it that way. All right,
You can also accidentally train indecision in people because, God damn, I always feel like a relationship's like 100%, which is, if you consume 80%, I'll take 20. We can't both have 80%. So if you're great at command and control, I'll be great at empathy with the children, or I'll be great at X, Y, Z, or whatever it is. So I'm never going to grow more than 20% because there's no need for me to. But eventually, some days when you come home at 70%, there's a 10% void, and you'll be frustrated by my inability to make a decision. And you'll be like, oh, right, we'll just do this. I'm making all the decisions again, am I? I'll make all the decisions. Okay, we're going to go there. And you're like, oh, God, why?
I tried. I mean, we've been together a long time. I've been married 27 years. So
congratulations.
Thank you. You learn it. But, our son's 22, and we've both tried hard to allow him to make decisions, even sometimes if it's the wrong decision, which I would naturally go, oh, that's wrong. You just have to go, just let him make that decision.
He's not walking off a cliff.
No, exactly. And he's managed to take himself up to Middlesbrough to uni, and he's survived. So I think he's doing something right. But you have to sort of go, it's not what I'd do, but I'll just let him do it. And be frustrated over it, but quietly frustrated.
Yeah. Watching especially when it's somebody so close to you, though, going through those things. But if equally, you don't want to be that helicopter parent, because they're never going to develop that muscle. And that's where I think, we come into this mental fragility side, where we've accidentally created some people of mental fragility. They've still got a tremendous amount of skill sets. And some people vilify the way that communities and society is going. Again, control the controllables, which is just there's people within your sphere of influence. But we are where we are, and there's lots of benefits to it. But it's also scary to think that we have subconsciously made people less able to withstand some of these things. When you and I were kids, there were people. I had paper round. I had Saturday job. My old man ran a construction company, so I had people pointing at me and saying, "Yeah, you're shit," or they said, "Do that, you're rubbish," or "No, you're not getting paid today." And I would just build that muscle from, "Oh, okay, that was a bit of a kick in the ass, but I'll just take it." We want to protect people from that because it's an injustice, but in doing so, they're not going to develop the muscle.
No, they're not, and we've tried hard with our son. Like I say, he's 22 in this social media world they're living. We've tried hard to help him realise that the answer's not all on Instagram type thing. You got to go out and find it. But he staggers me. His resilience. He's lived through me being unwell. He's lived through lots of stuff. He's known at his young age 2 people that have committed suicide. Well, I got to 49 before I knew anyone had committed suicide. And you think, and that's the same year that he went away to uni. So his mental resilience sort of staggers me.
On that spectrum, how much did you try and protect him from that experience? Because I openly try and discuss things like that with my daughter because I don't want her to vilify death.
No.
Because it's going to happen to all of us.
We told him everything.
Okay.
We've always had...
Some people might... That's a bit inappropriate, Steve. He's really a bit young for that, don't you think?
No, not at all. We've always, as he's grown up, been honest with him about everything.
That's an interesting word. Because some people go, what's honest and what's appropriate? Because we want the government, whatever, to be honest with us. There's a level, isn't there?
It is. When my friend committed suicide, we didn't know the reasons, but we knew he'd been unwell throughout the years and had lots of depression and been in and out of hospital and stuff like that. So we just told our son, look, this is what's happened, we don't know, and this is where we're at, and this is what's going on. He then had a close friend who committed suicide. So we openly talked about that because there's, again, from that mindset of, you've got to talk about it, get it out in the open. Yeah. So I didn't want him ever to not be able to tell us anything.
Because it's a bit like trying to, I always say about pushing a balloon underneath a swimming pool. It's going to pop up at some point.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's try and bring it up under control. Yeah. Otherwise, you might be on your own in 10 years' time and the balloon bounces up, splashes you, your family, the people close to you, may even hurt yourself. Yeah. Trying to push that down and everything's healthy. Now, you've done a lot of leadership in your role. Mm-hmm. It's a massive part of what you do. I know you do some outside of your role as well now. How does Stoicism bleed into that? Do you think it's a core part of leadership? It's not something I've seen directly articulated, but again, we say in books there's a lot of it in there. So how do you see that manifesting in that side of work?
Yeah, I've tried to have a think about this because I don't know whether me reading a lot of Stoicism and trying to be Stoic affects my leadership or whether that's just an innate sort of skill I have. I don't know. I only know one way.
It's the chicken or the egg, isn't
it?
It
is.
What comes first?
It's like,
nothing that happens to you happens in isolation, so it's all there.
Yeah, I've got half a blog written where I think I've started with, did I become the person I am because of the fire service, or was I that person the fire service just made me? I don't know.
Yeah.
The fire service has been my life for that long. I have no idea which person I am really, and I don't know which person I'll be on the 10th of September this year when I'm not in the fire service, and that's a worry. But, I only know one way to lead, and I know you'd sort of half give me this question before I come, and for me, whenever I've led a team, it's let's start with being honest, and with that honesty comes trust, and that's where I sort of start with. If I'm honest with you and I trust you, you might let me down occasionally, but if you've done it for the genuinely right reasons rather than trying to be underhand, then we'll figure it out.
Do you need to have trust to be able to cooperate? Do you need to trust me to do as you're told?
I only know one way, and that's I will naturally, if I pick up a new team, I'll start with a position of trust.
Okay.
I'll tell them what I want, and then I'll, from a position of trust you're going to do it.
Have you ever had a leader you don't trust? I'm not going to name names. But
yes.
But did you cooperate with their wishes or demands or instructions?
Yeah, of course, because you're in a disciplined service, sometimes you do as you're told, and always on the fire ground. And this is again is that pendulum. On the fire ground, Pete, do this.
Yeah.
Now, unless you think I'm going to put you in extreme danger, you will do, because that's command and control. And I will if I'm told to do. In a sort of a meeting environment, you might go, hang on a minute, Steve, have you thought of this? So it's that pendulum, and it's trying to trust a team to come back and go, I need you to do this for me, but I'm trust you're going to do it your way, and let's keep in contact. But for me, honesty, trust, empathy and compassion, that's the only way I try and lead. If I understand my team, understand a bit about their life, talk to them, and then I understand why they might have done something a different way to me. But again, it comes at a massive cost, as in it's not necessarily a desired way of leading for some people, shall we say? No,
yeah, because you have to leave a lot of space to have those discussions. So when we're about those discussions, I have observed personally that people can struggle changing gears from when it is appropriate to ask questions and when it is appropriate to explore other options and when the time is to simply carry out the incident commander's instruction, carry out the leader's intent. How do you see us striking that balance now? Because we're in an ever-changing world, both in the demands of the emergency services and the world in general is changing. We're not sure which stone to step on and which one we're going to slip off. So we want people's opinions. We want greater diversity in the emergency services. That's how we're going to progress. But we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. There's a time and a place when you just need to do what I've asked you to do. But up from a watch to a tactical level, to a strategic level, to an entire service and to emergency services as a whole, how do we strike that balance between, we don't just want to sit around and pontificate and have lots of, nothing's getting done. At some point, we either need to put the fire out or walk away. We either need to commit to the incident and restrain the individual. Yeah. How do we balance that spectrum and let people feel heard, but also we're going to do something now and you're going to do as asked?
Yeah, well, I try and split it in. My trade is two parts. There's the flexi duty side of my job. That's the put the wet stuff on the hot stuff, put the fire out. That's not changed in 30 years. Yeah, the buildings might have changed, but the fire's the same. And then there's the other side of my job, which is the office environment. For me, the command and control environment's simple enough. If I trust that I've put you in, let's say, as a sector commander, Pete, I need you to do this. I'll trust that you know what you're doing, but I ultimately have got responsibility, so I will keep an eye on what you're doing. But it will be assertive, effective, and safe. But it's got to be aggressive as well.
Yes,
I think
it's a great term. The term some people are scared of, because I like aggressive firefighting.
And it's how I would approach any incident. You go, I need you to let's do it aggressively, but safely, because you can do the two.
Be intentional here. Come on.
Yeah, the quicker we get in and the more aggressively we put the water on that fire or we take the roof off that car, the better the outcome.
I think in most things in life, speed wins.
Yeah.
A lot of the time. We can sit here and talk about it for ages. The fire's going to keep growing.
Yeah.
At some
But I
point,
think,
for better or worse, I want competent people to move quickly and assertively.
Yeah.
And with a rationale of assessment of risk.
Exactly. And my job as the incident commander ultimately is to have assessed that risk based on what you've told me, my situational awareness that I've talked about. I do a lot of stuff at the moment about reviewing people when they're doing command and trying to coach and teach them. And if I've built my situational awareness, then the plan is my plan, and I'm going to get you to do that small element of that plan for the overall outcome. And I've assessed the risk, and you have to trust that I know what I'm talking about. And there will be times where you go, Steve, are you sure? Now, the way I lead is if you go, Steve, are you sure? I'll go, yeah. Or I might listen to you and go, actually, yeah, you got a point. And I'll change my plan. I'll never be afraid to go, yeah, I got that wrong. That's commanding and putting the fight out as a team. Applying that in the office environment sometimes doesn't work.
I was about to say, what we've subconsciously done then is we've gravitated to talking about the operational side of it. But you know what? We're pretty good at that. As we've said, less and less operators die on the front line, which is a good thing. Where we are facing our biggest challenges, from engagement to keeping people within our employment, less turnover, all that sort of stuff. That's where we're not as good. Not as many people are applying for the emergency services as they used to. And I think that's where our greatest level. So when we talk about coaching, mentoring, a lot of the stuff that you do, that's where I think we need to weight the pendulum more towards that. We need more resources. We need more skills. We need more people, perhaps such as yourself or others, to help us learn those soft skills. We're good at the hard skills. It's the soft skills we're not great at.
Yeah, I think we do. And I went through a leadership degree years and years ago, and one of the books I read then was Daniel Pink.
Was that from your service, sorry?
Yeah. Okay. So our service put us through a BA Honours degree in leadership and management, which I'm forever grateful for. But some of the reading I did around that, I think I'd read the book before by Daniel Pink, but he talks about autonomy, mastery and purpose. And I will always try that with my teams.
Yeah.
I'll give you the autonomy to make the decisions in your job, because then you'll master it and you'll be good at it.
Yeah.
And then hopefully you'll get a sense of purpose from it. But if we can't do that, then let's try and generate a sense of purpose for you. Because if you've got a sense of purpose, you'll pretty much do anything for me.
Yeah.
The cost to me for that is I've got to understand your job, so I know when you're sort of crapping me a bit, or if you're doing a good job for me. And I've got to understand a bit about you as to you go, I think one of your podcasts the other day, if you want to work till midnight one night, then fine, I understand why that is. I'm not going to ask you to, but you might do that because that's your sense of purpose. And I have a colleague who...
And sharing a sense of balance as well.
Yeah.
For me, I'm an addict, I'm a workaholic, so my sense of balance, I will feel in balance, but it might be very different to somebody else's. Yeah. And in my old role, we did what was called ROW, which is results only work environment. Yeah. You only had to attend one meeting a week, and you had your tasking, and you could arrange meetings whenever you like. But we want, and that's what we want. Everybody wants that. And pretty much everyone results. Don't just want you to show up for 12 hours. And that's what subconsciously is difficult about the emergency services as a whole, because you just need to be there and ready. But that's not the limitations of what we expect from a professional operator, from a professional firefighter, a professional police officer, a professional paramedic. Yeah. It can't just stop there. But that's an accepted level, competent. That is all you're required to do. The rest of it is a nice to for some people, not a need to.
Yeah, and people have always talked about it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. But I think sometimes in management you just go, no, it's just about the destination. I just need you to get 10,000 widgets made. I don't care how you make them.
Yeah.
I try not to be like that. For me, there's still a target. We've still got to get that target, but the how we get to that target is just as important, because then that creates that purpose and that autonomy for you, and you feel, oh yeah, I've made 10,000 widgets, but I really feel valued for making them. Yeah. I can get you to make 10,000 by just employing more people and make your robots.
Yeah. And I felt part of the process. I felt valued and included, rather than just, if we just judge the metric. Like I said, Steve, I want you to drink that coffee, even if you didn't like coffee. I could just stand here and scream at you until you drink the coffee.
Exactly.
And the metric would show I motivated Steve to drink the coffee, but I'd rather he did it if I convinced him of the benefits of it and asked him what he most enjoyed about the things that he drinks and things like that, so that you could then feel part of the process and feel included in it. And then you may very well go on to drink coffee the rest of your life. If your experience was I just got shouted at until I drank it, if we judge people only on the metrics and the what rather than the how and the why, if we like the Simon Sinek's, if we negate the how and the why, it's just the what, it's just the do it, it's just the metric. That's where, and equally here, we had a successful incident. what did we leave in our wake? What was the effect on the people involved in it? Yeah. It doesn't matter, we saved the thing and that was the thing, and then somebody decided to leave. I don't know why, it was their own means. Okay.
and that's an interesting...
Something was in the wake there.
Exactly, it's an interesting turn of phrase, what do we leave in the wake? If you apply that to the office environment, it's, what's the impact of me hitting that metric? Yeah. And it's the impact that interests me more, because that's the empathy and the compassion. I don't want to hit the metric at the expense of my teams, because I can do both. I can hit the metric and my team will love it and they'll want to work harder for me. They won't think they're working harder, but they will. And that's the...
Because if you're driven only by the metric, it's that whole impact intended versus impact felt. You turn around and go, we won! And they go, I hate you.
Exactly. You know.
Whoa, we won, right? I want, like your wife, I want a divorce, not your wife. But that's it, you're like, what a successful week. I don't want to live here anymore.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I've worked hard to be a leader that people like to work for, but that comes sometimes at the expense of how people perceive your leadership is different. You know, the biggest thing that happened to me, when I was 50 years old, my team brought me a birthday cake, and I said to them, "You won't understand. That's that a team has brought me a birthday. I'd only been in charge probably 6 months. They brought me a birthday cake, and I'm like, that's huge, because it means that you like me enough to buy me a birthday cake." And it was a small, I don't know, 5 cake. It didn't matter. It was that it was like, shall we get the boss a cake? You're like, you brought the boss a cake. I like that. Thank you. Yeah. And that told me everything I needed to know about. If I'd only made 9,000 widgets that day, it didn't matter. They were like, we brought him a cake.
We see that when, I've seen it on stations where you see a leader leave a station or you see them retire, and the response from the team, it might sound different to anybody outside of the emergency services, but do they get bucketed or not? You know, do they get hazed? And we're not going into this whole bullying culture that, for anybody that's listening, what we're saying now is always done in, I've not seen it done with somebody that's not receptive of it. But the worst thing is if somebody doesn't, and I've seen that, you know, and I said, your last day at whatever station the other day, you know, how did it go? You know, you have to do a roast, or was there a thing, or is the NDO, did you parade out? And they go, I kind of hung around for a bit after shift, but you know, everybody had already gone. And I'm like, sad.
See, I've told you this about people, you having a retirement do? I'm like, I might get a drink together for a drink. And then someone was taking the mickey out of me, well, what if no one turns up? I'm like, well, no one turns up, that's fine. Yeah. As long, if I can retire and people go, we enjoyed working with him and he was a nice bloke, that'll do. You know.
But also it's knowing if people like that sort of event. For example, I always have like a phone call with somebody, or most people I've spoken to that retire, and if I'm going to miss them or whatever, or I want them to know that I valued their input, and when I work with them, I often have a phone call. I say, dude, if you're free for a chat for your time, blah, blah, blah. Because I don't tend to attend those types of social events. They make me feel I don't drink, so I feel a little bit uncomfortable, and I strangely struggle in that. I love one-to-one, but if I'm in a massive group, I struggle to find my place. I'm too conditioned in having deep conversations. So when I sit down with somebody, and they're like, bloody hell, Peter, I'm just here to have a bit of a chill. You know, I don't want to talk about I'm not putting the world to rights here. So I struggle with that. But, for example, if it were more people like me and I didn't attend your retirement do, it's not because I didn't value you. So again, we talk about reward metrics, equally about how people like to engage with something.
Exactly.
Different.
And then, you know, and if you stick your stoic head on and go, if I react to you not coming to my retirement do, that's about me.
That's about me. You know, how I want to be loved, or how I want to be acknowledged.
Exactly.
You've not ticked my box.
Yep.
But maybe you didn't think. I always think about this with relationships. Like me and my wife. If I wanted to express love to her, if my way of expressing love is I'm going to snog your face off in front of everybody because that's how much I love you, she might, or she would hate that.
Yeah, exactly.
That's not her way. Or if I want to hold your hand all the time and sit on the sofa and cuddle you, she'd be like, Jesus, get off. Yeah, I feel swamped, I feel smothered. That's not. But if that's how you give love and not how they receive it, same as like if your way of acknowledging somebody is you give them loads of money, but they're like, dude, you know, I've kind of wanted like a high five, or you know, I would rather you sat down and said, well, I gave you a raise. What's wrong with you? Yeah. I know, but you didn't say well done. Well done. What, are you a child? Do I need to say, well, yeah, actually, maybe that's how I feel rewarded and acknowledged. You know, I don't want to be acknowledged publicly, privately. You might bring it to me out on parade and go, just want to, you know, it was great the other day, blah, blah, blah. Great bit of command from Dave. I wanted to just double click on what he did at that incident. I thought it was really fantastic. And you go, cheers, boss. And everyone might give him a round of applause. Or he might go, I felt really humiliated about what you did this morning. You kind of singled me out, and that made me feel very uncomfortable. impact intended versus impact felt.
Yeah,
very
and
different.
It's, so I always try and go back to Stoicism and again become a bore on it. But the Stoic virtues of courage, temperance, wisdom, and justice. The idea of being a good Stoic is to live a virtuous life, and we could interpret virtuous in however we wanted.
Yeah.
But some of that to me is, if I'm going to be nice to people, that's being virtuous. It's being genuine with them. Courage, you can have courage in whatever way you want. I'm just reading the book.
Courage is different. Yeah, courage is. There's many ways to be courageous.
It is,
People
and
look at emergency services and go, "You're very courageous." Courage is many ways.
Exactly, because I always say to people now, I don't do the dangerous stuff. I tell other people to do the dangerous stuff nowadays.
So we have done it at some point, but yes.
So I'm not courageous on a day-to-day basis in physically risking my life, other than driving on blue lights to the incident. However, I've got to be courageous in some of my decisions to tell Pete to go into the burning building.
But also you've got to be courageous at your level to try and change things in services, in your role, that you have systemically known to be a problem for a long time. And now, before you go, oh, you know what, some group managers should really be doing something about this because it's an absolute shambles. And if something needs to change, if it's bullying, if it's harassment, if it's cultural, if it's equipment, whatever it may be, you're now in that position. So if it was rubbish up until now, it was like somebody else's fault. Now it's you to be courageous and step up and go, I think this is a problem.
Exactly.
I think this is something. And that's courage. It's not stepping into the fire courage, but you're sticking your head above the parapet courage.
And that's mostly where my courage comes now. If there's something to be said in a meeting, I'll give it a few minutes. If no one says it, I'll normally put my hand up and go, I've got a question. And it's generally the question that others have been thinking to ask. Now, again, that comes at a cost. Could I have been promoted higher than the group commander? Quite possibly. I'm not saying my actions has limited that, but
it will have affected it.
It will have affected it one way or another. And I'm all right with that. The part of me trying to be virtuous is I'm not going to let that go. I'm going to ask that question. I'm going to challenge that decision. I'm going to battle that injustice.
Well, that's the best way for you to serve those around you as well, because otherwise we become subject to groupthink and subconscious bias because we're all just repeating ourselves down a rabbit hole. Somebody just for the best of intentions said, I think we should go east, looking for a sunset, and they just kept going east, and everyone said, I think your logic was good. At some point you said, well, I spotted one in the opposite direction.
Exactly.
The best thing for you to do, and the best way for you to serve the group, is to say, because maybe nobody saw it. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? It's that whole thing, the elephant in the room. Everybody's seeing this thing that no one else has seen. But if someone doesn't raise their hand, and it takes courage to do that, because everyone's saying different.
Yeah, the elephant in the room, I think I've used that phrase many a time. So can we just confront that elephant in the room, please?
Yeah. When you do that, do you do it from a personal perspective, or do you do it from a group perspective? Because what I try and encourage in my team is when we use generalized terms of, well, everybody thinks, right? Sorry, I interrupt, but can we just tell me what you think? Because I don't speak on behalf of everybody, and neither do you. So, and I want to hear your opinion, because your opinion is important to me, as is everybody else's. But let's just try and avoid everyone says this, or it's always the case that X, or you never. Let's be careful with extreme terms, and also owning your opinion is important, rather than saying, well, everyone says this. Everyone?
Yeah, I mean,
So when you say the elephant in the room, do you say it as we're all thinking this? You don't know what everyone's thinking.
I think I do it both ways sometimes. Sometimes I just do it to be mischievous, to try and raise, just to try and poke the bear, poke the tiger, raise the conversation.
Yeah. It's important as well to test a theory.
Yeah,
because it might be made of paper. It might fall over as soon as I poke it.
Exactly. There's many sort of, let's say, larger meetings I've been in where I'll deliberately roll the hand grenade in, not in a nasty way or to annoy people, just to go, well, let's ask this question and let's open the conversation, and somebody else might go, oh, I was thinking that. So it's again, it links back to that debriefing and diffusing. If I get Firefighter Smith and she opens up about how she's feeling about the incident, the firefighter over this side of the table might go, I thought that as well. It's the same in a meeting. I'm going to ask this question because I know someone's thinking it and they're too afraid to. I've never been afraid to ask that question. But again, you've got to balance, is that just my opinion that I'm thrusting upon others? Or
I did this in a very large meeting led by our lead in EDI very recently. EDI, for anyone that's unfamiliar, Equality, Diversity and Inclusion. And after their introduction stated that this was a safe environment and that we wanted to have a safe and open conversation to, dispel any thoughts, fears, rumours, concerns about language. So I purposefully brought into conversation some what I would even consider to be a very offensive, stereotypical terms, so that we could have those conversations here. And it was led by a fantastic individual in my service. He doesn't want to be, I know he doesn't want to know who people are, but he's very fantastic, and I want him to know that I think that. And he led the meeting fantastically well, and he showed great self-awareness, and he's a wonderful ambassador for it. But you could see the reaction from people in the room that went, I can't believe you just said that. I cannot see where that hand grenade goes, because he just used the N word or the C word or the whatever word. He said something that would be in a different environment considered to be very offensive. But like you say, sometimes it's good to test that theory, and there needs to be somebody that's going to say that.
It is. I mean, slightly different analogy, but after the George Floyd stuff in America, we've got some great networking groups in our organisation, and it was over Teams where they were trying to look at how do we deal with and react to George Floyd in America. And someone brought up about, you've got to be actively anti-racist. And I was like, I said, well, can someone explain that to me? And I said, and I'm genuinely asking because I'm a 50-year-old white male. I don't understand what anti-racist is. And it was to try and promote the conversation to go, I need to learn, but I don't know what I need to learn. And it wasn't in a controversial way. It's like, it's okay.
So Yohari's window is the unknown unknowns.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't think I'm racist, but I use these words and I do this and I behave in this way. That's racist, Steve.
Yeah, but what I knew I wasn't racist, but I wasn't sure I was anti-racist. So I was trying to say to them, what's anti-racist?
How do you sit in the middle? I don't know. And still be unique.
Yeah.
Still be an individual and use your own beautiful language and individuality, because we don't want this homogenous, everyone looks and sounds the same. We want diversity, but so we don't want to educate people about diversity by discouraging diversity.
But I think the reason I was happy to ask that question is, one, that's just how I am, but I knew I was in a comfortable space where people will go, all right, then we'll help you understand that. Because as a 50-year-old white male, I know that I've led a semi-privileged life compared to a 50-year-old black male.
100%.
I understand that, but I can't truly understand it.
No. But help me bridge the gap a little bit.
Exactly. And people were really open to go, well, it's about this and about that. They go, okay, that leads you down a road of reading some other stuff and trying to understand. Actually acting upon that then is a different challenge in itself.
When did you first join the fire service?
I joined in 1992. I was an electrician. I was an apprentice electrician back then. And it was around the time of...
How old would you have been then? Sorry to ask a very personal question.
I was 22 when I joined.
22.
Yeah, and I qualified as an electrician, and then the economy was going downhill a little bit. I had to probably go and work out of town somewhere, and I was like, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
My mum tells a different story, but I actually remember standing on the top of a building in Birmingham, and I could see a fire in the distance. I was like, that looks an interesting job. And in my head, the story is that I applied, and it took a long time to get in. But yeah, I joined in 1992, 22 years old.
And it was simply from... So did you ever had any desire towards the emergency services before that?
I don't remember that. My mum seems to think that I did, but I don't remember that.
We all connect the dots differently looking backwards,
exactly.
don't we? We claim to have a logic, like it was always heading in this direction. Not really. I didn't have no idea up until that point.
I didn't do very well at school. I wasn't a naughty kid at school, but I only come out with, I think, O-level geography and sociology, which doesn't really set you up for... and woodwork, sorry, doesn't really set you up for a life. And then I became an electrician. So,
yeah. What did you think the fire service did? What was your perception of the role?
For me, I joined to... And you used the phrase in one of your things the other day. I joined just to be a knuckle-dragging firefighter. I was quite happy with that. That's what we recruited back then.
Yeah.
And I had...
Can you put wet stuff on hot stuff?
Exactly. The 14 years of being a firefighter on a fire engine, it's still the best job in the world, but I was at a busy station. We were doing over 3,500 calls a year, watch strength of 16.
Beautiful.
Yeah, we had a hydraulic platform. It was the best place ever to be. So I'd have been a firefighter forever. Yeah. It was lots of other things that led me to get promoted, but that's sort of where I've come from. I've only done inner city stations. It was... always busy.
You find as well with that, and again, it's a subconscious thing because you said you're from a watch strength of 16. A, the strength of numbers. B, it allows for a much richer, deeper culture from that big cocktail of everybody pouring it in, and everyone can give a moral adjustment to a situation. But if you're just a watch of 9 and you've only ever got 4 or 6 on duty, you need to have much stronger characters to sustain a balance, because you only need 1 or 2 outliers who become dispassionate, who become, lost in the role, or they have a traumatic incident. And the tipping point is less. It can happen quicker versus cultures like that. How do we, now that we've got less people in the services and our watches are smaller, and we're having the distancing of society and social media and phone cultures and all that sort of stuff, how do we sustain that richness and sustain that culture?
Well, I think that's, a lot of watches now as well. When I was on this watch in a city, Birmingham, people lived relatively close to where they worked, so you could stop for a drink after work. Now people live miles away from where they work and they're commuting, so they don't stop. Got to get back home. And I understand that. So I think we've lost, comes back to the very start of this, and we've lost some of that social connectedness. We don't have bars on fire stations anymore. Some brigades might do, but I know mine don't.
Some don't even eat together.
Yeah, so you don't have that connectedness, that visceral, let's sit down and have a meal together or just have a pint together. I understand the bit about the bars, We had to sort of stop
preparing food and eating together comes back to that sitting around a fire.
Exactly, it comes down to that connectedness. And I think that for the future of the fire service, that's going to be the harder bit. How do you keep that? If I've eaten with you and I trust you and I understand you, and then I need you to help me run through that burning door, there's a different level of connectedness there too. You're a standby in from 20 miles away, I haven't worked with you before. Yeah. I'm not saying you won't back me up going through that door, but there'll be a split second of worry in my head.
Yes.
Do you, don't you?
Yeah.
And I think, we're recruiting different people now, and rightly so. We need a different mindset of people in the organisation, but at the expense of what? I've just seen a news article today. I think West Midlands Police, someone's moaning that some new West Midlands Police recruits are saying that he gets sick from the blue lights on the fire engines. I don't know how genuine the article is, but the point being, a police officer who's having a bit of a moan going, we're recruiting all these woke people that won't do
Can we change the colour of the light? No.
Are we close to creating that in the fire service? I don't think so.
Yeah.
But 5%, let's say, of our time, you need to do the hard stuff. You need to do it aggressively and really well. We've got to try not to lose that somehow.
But also we need to create a percentage of time. We now need to intentionally create a percentage of time that's around something that allows space for people to build those cultures. It's got an intangible metric, but it's such a valuable metric. A lot of places have started doing engagement scores and stuff like that. Very hard for them to do because we never needed to do it before, because it was just natural. It just happened. We just developed a strong culture because we had a watch of 16 people, men, women, whatever it may be. Now we don't have that, and it's like we're trying to say, where's the thing in this inventory? Where's the thing we were missing before? Who used to provide that? And we're like, it was always kind of there. Okay, it's not there anymore. Who do we go to get it again? And it's like, I don't know, society's fault. Okay, I don't care whose fault it is. It's our responsibility. I love that aspect. It doesn't matter whose fault it is that it's not there anymore or it's less. It's our responsibility to continue it, to create it. That's why I viscerally have a problem with people moaning about the emergency services, because I'm like, there is no bad emergency services. It's bad us, because we are the emergency services. So it's our responsibility. I don't care who you think's fault it is. It's our responsibility in this sphere of control the controllables. If we think the service is rubbish, fine. If we think the watch is rubbish, the watch is us.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we've got to be better and more effective at that upstream firefighting, which we are. I joined in 92, and it was around the time we started doing, I think there were home fire safety checks then, and fitting smoke detectors. And that arguably has reduced the number of calls, reduced the number of deaths. There's no better metric than that.
Yeah.
But that means now when we are called, we're doing more of that and less training and less turning out, and I understand why that is, and I don't have an issue with it, but that means we have got to train harder for the 5% of the time when we are actually needed.
You've got to want to do it.
Yeah.
And don't ever dare moan to me about being on incident for another 20 minutes, or dare moan to me about being out on the drill ground. If you want that, go and work in community safety, which is great, and it's a great role to be in. Don't moan about the bit you say you want more of when we're doing it.
Exactly. And that's my take at incidents. You know, if I have somebody I have to call for relief at 3 o'clock in the morning, I'll explain to them why I've called you out and this is what I need from you. And we'll have a conversation. But I still need you here at 3 o'clock in the morning, and you may have to sit with that fire for 3 hours.
Yeah.
But hang on a minute, that's what you're paid to do.
And also, you can take so much from being there. You know, train your team, go through whatever analytical assessments, you know, do bloody branch techniques, do whatever you want. There's a fire here. Come and play with it. Don't put it out if it's a sit and
we're
watch.
Still called firefighters at the end of the day. It's a very small part, and it'll get smaller and smaller the better we get at everything, and the better buildings get. But people still. You know, any survey you do with the public, it'll be, I want a fire engine to turn up, I want a police car to turn up when I dial 999.
Yeah.
Every survey I've ever done has been, are you going to send me a fire engine? Yes. That's the bit they're mostly interested in.
Yeah. I think what we need to get more of now as well, though, is people that don't just want to, and this is why maybe we'll see a change of the term. I know we would call us emergency responders or first-time responders or category A, B, whatever. The why behind why people join, is it, I want to put out fires, or I want to help people. If you want to help people, great. Because how you help people might be putting out fires. But if your core is I want to help people, there's lots of ways we can do that.
Yep.
But if your core is just I want to put out fires, this genuinely might not be the role for you anymore.
Yeah. I agree. It's 3,500 calls a year when I joined. You're not doing that now. So the world's changed. We need to recruit different people. 100% agree. But I do need those people to put a breathing apparatus set on and 100%. Run into that burning building.
Every goddamn day. Point me in the right direction and press play.
Yeah.
If anybody remotely comes anywhere near our fire station to do a drill, I am like, can we get in on it?
Yeah,
100%. And I always be the first one. I hate it when I'm the only JO on, because it means I've usually got to be in charge or I've got to be safety. And I'm like, I want to get the goddamn set on. You know, so whenever there's a dry LPP, I'm like, I'll go first, because then it'll be wet and it'll be a little bit easy for the next person. But I'm never going to ask you to do something I'm not willing to do myself.
I mean, I'd still put a BA on there. It might take me a little bit of persuasion now, but I'd still put one on if I had to.
Why did you first start your blog? Because I think putting something in print, putting your own thoughts in print, is quite a scary thing to do. The fear of judgment, the fear of who the hell are you to write this? You know, or are you espousing all this wisdom? Who the hell are you? That must be petrifying. But I found it fascinating reading through a lot of your stuff. That's why I wanted to have you on.
I think it was around that sort of journaling and thinking, I think I needed to empty my brain of stuff. And I thought a blog is probably the best place to put it. If anybody read it, I don't get that. I think I've had about something like 2,500 reads, and there's a lot of blogs on there. So it's not there for anything. I don't think I started.
I say that though, it's depth versus breadth.
Well, exactly.
The impact I had from reading a few of them, and that's why I specifically like to bring a few of them up in here.
I think I started it just to empty my brain of thoughts. And that's like, I'll try and add a bit of stoicism to this, and it always end with something profound and try and be better than I am type thing. And then you start writing about leadership, and you write about different things and life events. And then I stopped for a bit, and then I picked it back up, and I think, I've changed the picture. There's a picture of me and my two mates, the one that killed himself, and it's like, so it's a bit of a biography. It's a bit of a stoicism journey manual, and it's a bit of leadership, and then it goes off into other stuff.
Well, I think there's something really powerful, and I always misquote the person, so I'm just going to use the quote, but it's not mine. Is when they say think in ink. When you put your own thoughts down on paper, and I've got like a notepad next to my bed, because it helps me put my thoughts into reality. Because when they're in your head, they always say, you get stuck in your head, you're dead. You're up there, and it's all you can't catch it, you can't pin it on a board, you can't do anything with it. But when you write it down, you conceptualize it and go, wow, that's interesting, I've just written that. I didn't realise I thought that. And it allows you to then adapt it or rationalise it and go, nah, Steve, you're way off. Man, do you really think that? Or you go, wow, yeah, absolutely. And then you can adjust it as a physical thing that exists in the universe, or you can at least make clear judgment on it.
Yeah.
So I think it's a really fascinating thing to do.
Yeah, and most of them are written in a wanna really. I'll sit down and go, I have a title. I've got about 8 drafts at the moment with different titles. Because I have an image and I go, right, put a title down.
Yeah.
And then I'll probably write it in one go and then go back and tweak it. It's not like I don't design a blog page for weeks. It's like 20 minutes, half an hour, it's done. Then I'll leave it, come back to it, and then I just put it out. And sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad. I stand by everyone I've put out there.
How would you judge good or bad though?
Well, exactly.
And who is judging it?
Well, it comes down to that. Yeah, we all get driven down. How many people have read that or liked it? I try not to look. But I've got an Instagram page where I like my photography, and you get driven by... Why have more people liked the picture of the dog And the really artistic landscape one I took, and it frustrates the hell out of me. But you got to try not to look at that. Comes out Stoicism. Why am I seeking?
I was going to say your Stoicism muscle is weak at that moment in time.
That's the alcoholic day going. I need 50 likes. You're going, get a grip of yourself. It is what it is. It's we're all.
But as we reward that behaviour more and more through society, it's going to make things like Stoicism quite a niche thing that people won't pick up the tool. You know, they'll look at it like they'll look at it like a tool to make combustible engines, and they'll go, "Oh, we're all driving electric now, mate, so you can throw all them tools away." No, sorry, it was actually a tool to empower the driver, not the vehicle. So it's still applicable because it's you, and everywhere we go in life, we're surrounded by people. So learning more about human behaviour is always going to reward us. But if we are driven by the externals, I worry where that path takes us.
100%. You know, you think kids nowadays seeking likes that's dichotomy of control and action, isn't it? It's not in my control how many people like the picture of the dog, but I react to how many people like the picture of the dog. And you got to have a word yourself and go, stop worrying about how many people like the picture of the dog. What it tells you is I might as well take rubbish pictures of dogs if I want likes, or I should worry about taking the picture I want to take and put it out. And if people like it, they like it. If they don't, it shouldn't matter to me.
Yeah.
But you still go, I've only had 20 likes. Shit.
I wanted to ask you about consistency, because it sounds as though as you've developed in your thinking, as we all have, I'm certainly a different person than I was a year ago, and I hope I'm different in a year's time. But one of the great core characteristics you speak about in leadership is this consistency. So in an ever-changing world and as a developing person, how do we remain? Can we remain consistent? Can you remain consistent as you change? Surely there's a dichotomy there.
Yeah, I think there is. I think I have put one blog out about consistency, but probably harped on about it a few times. For me, it's consistency in how you lead people, consistency in application of be it policies, procedures, processes, consistency in how I speak to you, how I deal with you. If I'm always this Steve Harris, and I consistently deal with you this way and talk to you this way, if I come in another day and I'm a different person, it's either because I'm having a bad day or you really let me down.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you and go, look, this is how I'm going to manage you. This is how we're going to be consistently do this. And if we work like this, I'll give you all the support you need, all that top cover. I think what I've seen in my time internally and externally is a lack of consistency at that level. We're driven down a route of we get these targets, we do this, do that, regardless of how we do it. And it just frustrates me, a lack of consistency.
Because we all have a need for variation, but we also have a need for consistency. And like, you know, the flaw needs to be, we've played word association game. If I said consistent, you might say reliable, and somebody might say trustworthy, and somebody might say a variety of things. But we always need a level of consistency. Otherwise, if I didn't trust the floor was going to hold me, I'm not going to step from the hallway into the kitchen. It needs to be consistently the same. Yep. But we also want a little bit of variation within that consistency to allow us to feel interested and excited, so things don't become boring. So what areas do we need to create space for variation in, like the fact that you'll have different members of your team that want different reward mechanisms, that behave differently, that want to react differently to you. So you can't be consistent. You can be consistent with everybody, but you need to be consistently different with everybody, surely. Yeah, and I think that comes down to that sort of compassion and understanding your team. You know, the team that I led up until 12 months ago, I probably directly managed about 4 people, but I probably touched around 60, 70 people on a monthly basis, probably more than that. And it's understanding that actually this lady over here needs to be treated differently to this person, which comes at a high cognitive cost. Massive cognitive cost. But you need a bandwidth. Yeah,
but the reward is I speak to her this way, she needs the occasional hug, him over there needs his ego stroked occasionally. But in being consistent in how I treat them, and they go, he's going to treat me like that every single time I see him. The rewards are huge, but it comes at a high cognitive cost. You know, at the expense of lots of other things.
I wonder if I'm reaching here, but I'm coming back to when we have our EDR, and I don't want to make this that kind of conversation, but like everybody, you know, people, I treat everybody the same. I hope not, because they're all bloody different. You know what I mean? You're going to damage some people if you treat everybody the same. If you treat everybody fairly, great, okay. And you know, I don't want to get into a clever word game, but We want to treat everybody equally. We want to treat everybody fairly. But we should we treat everybody the same? Surely not, because like you say, we're all uniquely different. And if you don't have the ability to take on that cognitive load, I feel like we're not going to get the most effective teams.
Yeah, it comes back to one of the virtues, doesn't it? It comes back to having the wisdom to understand that I treat her differently because that's how she needs to be treated to how I treat him over there or that team. That team need me to be authoritarian. That's what they crave. That's what they want. Him there needs a bit of freedom to go off and play in the sand and do this and do that. Ultimately, add it all together, it achieves what I want to achieve. And they all feel, it comes back to that, they all feel that they've got a purpose. They've all got a bit of autonomy to go, I can go and play in the sand for 5 minutes, that'll be all right.
Yeah, because you never know what you might find.
Exactly.
They'll come back with a gem.
A lot of some of the great leadership books talk about, having these sort of 20% days a month where you just let people go off and invent something new.
Yeah.
What's it got to be? I don't care. Go and invent something new. Hard to do in a public sector, but you imagine a private business.
Google do that, don't they?
Yeah, of course they do.
I don't know how often they do. I think it's like one weekend a month, or it might even be 1 week a year, where they say work on any project you like. And that's where something obscene, like I think it's the Pareto principle, they talk about it, because it's like the 80-20 rule. 80% of their biggest innovations come from that 20% of the time when they say, go and do whatever you think is going to be interesting. You want to learn more about HR, you want to go and play with the laptop innovations or that new project over there. Because there'll be so many people with ideas inside services that go, God, if I could just spend a day with fire control, or if I could just spend a day with the police constables, or if I could just spend a day on the ambulance, I'd be able to show them, because I just found this thing whilst I was sitting in my office on lunch doing waffle. I found a thing, man, you need to know about it, and I can show you how to do it, but I'm never there. You're out of reach for me. I'm never with you. But I feel like, unless I make it for myself, that space isn't given to me, because some people might just toss it off as well. That's the problem.
I think it's tough in this world we live in sometimes for people to allow you that space, because it's what gets measured gets done, and you go, I want to go and play on this for a bit. Well, what's it going to give me? Might not give you anything, boss. And it's having the courage to go, all right then, go and do that. And I'll trust that you're doing it because you think there's something in it. You're not just going to sit in McDonald's for 4 hours and pretend to do some work. It comes back to that trust. Someone says to me, I've got this idea, it might not work, but I want to have a play with it. Okay, carry on.
Well, surely that's coming back to our discussion of trauma, and you obviously work a lot with things like trim and stuff like that from the military.
No.
Okay.
So trim, and I heard it on one of the other blogs. In our service, we did look at trim, but we've never yet gone down that route. I know some of the USAR people, I think, use trim. Like I say, we developed...
It came from the military originally. Police heavily adopted it.
Exactly.
And it's bled over to a lot of other services.
I think we developed from this Mitchell model, this 7-phase model, to what we do now, which is a sort of critical incident debrief, as I said earlier, how are you today? What's left? And how can we deal with what's left? So we've never really gone down that trim route. What we do is we record, if 6 people have come to a debrief, we take their names and roll numbers, and we have a record that they've been there.
Okay.
We don't put down what's been written down, what's been said or discussed, and we might say, Steve was there as the facilitator. So for a duty of care, we keep a record of that, but we never mark and score people, which I know is what trim is.
Yeah, to an extent. So give me an understanding of time frames on when you would do a critical incident debrief in relation to when the the incident has happened.
So I tried to write it around. I did write my own model called the Harris model, but I haven't done anything with it yet. But essentially,
coward.
It's a
I'm joking, but
I've copyrighted it.
Imposter syndrome. Go on.
It's a peer support model. So me and you go out to a nasty incident today.
Wait till you're retired.
Yeah. Let's say we go out to a nasty RTC. A couple of people die. What we have in our organisation is the watch manager on scene or the crew commander will say, "I want a PID here, post-incident diffusing." Okay. Now the idea of that is that's done immediately at the scene.
Okay.
Or before the end of that shift. And that is nothing more than a 10-15 minute, somebody comes down and just says, is everybody all right? Does anybody need anything? It might be that I come
Who comes?
So we have trained PID officers. It's generally flexi-duty officers because they're on...
Do they have to be a particular rank? Or?
No,
okay. Just
that flexi-duties are available 24/7, so it naturally fitted to that. So let's say I turned up and you were the crew. I'd just go, look, guys, I'm just here for your well-being. Is everybody all right? And I've always said in the training, it might be as simple as, Pete needs a fag. So, but yeah, go and have a fag. It's just, I'm just doing that and make a cup of tea. You might be covered in blood and snot or whatever. So the best thing I can do is get you all off the run and get you showered. But the idea of the post-incident infusion is to go, look, in the next few hours, you might feel these things. You might have these reactions. So it's that pre-education to go, look, you're getting back at 11 o'clock at night. You might not sleep very well tonight, but that's all right. That's normal. So it's just trying a post-incident infusion just to normalise and highlight what might happen. So what you've just done legs day, guess what? Your legs might hurt tonight. You're used to that.
Yeah.
What you're not used to is you're going back and I can't sleep for 3 hours because I'm thinking about that incident and going, well, that's normal.
Yeah.
Because if your legs are aching after legs day, you go, well, I know that's normal. I've pushed it a bit hard. So it's just to
It'd be
normalise.
uncommon to have a normal response to an abnormal event.
Exactly.
You should have an abnormal response, and that's okay.
Yeah. So that's supposed to be immediately after the incident or before the end of shift. And then what we try and do, based on the 4 on 4 off principle that we work, is if you then want what's called a critical incident debrief, you as a watch requested it.
Okay. Who does the request have to come from?
Anyone.
Okay.
So what we've got in our organisation, it could be anonymous.
New probationary firefighter?
Anybody.
Okay.
And what we're finding over the years is more...
Is it an email? Is it a phone call? Can they... How do they... Do they need
They
approval to do it?
No,
what if the rest of the watch don't want to do it?
Well, we always say, look, if you want to ask for it and you don't want anyone to know, just send an email, speak to your watch manager, you can ring this person. So we have processes of how to do it. Or I might, as the PID officer, go, do you know what? I'm going to request one for them anyway. I would never tell them, but we'll request one. So then you generally try and wait 4 days. Because I read somewhere, and I can't find the research, that 95% of people over 4 days will have a sense of recovery. They'll just naturally feel better. Your legs ached the next day after leg day. 4 days later, they don't ache as much. Guess what? That's your body recovering. Well, cognitively and mentally, that's what happens.
Do you remember the Lost Connections, just to jump back to Johan Hari, when they speak about antidepressants and anxiety medication and things like that? There used to be, I'm going to forget, they used to have a score, I'm going to say the Hutchinson, probably wrong, and when you experienced an event, you're naturally going to have, like if my partner died today, I should have a reaction to it.
Yeah.
But if I go to the doctors tomorrow and say, dude, I'm massively depressed, I don't want to kill myself, I don't think, now, and I might get this wrong, I apologise if I do, they may prescribe me medication, not go, what's happened, because they're not a psychologist. This is just my, local GP. They're just going to assess me on this score. Are they showing signs of X, Y, Z? Okay, not the Y, like, if your missus died yesterday, this is absolutely fine. Let's talk about it. Let's come back, maybe take 5 sessions of free psychological support, and then let's review it then. Because to get you straight onto some medication or immediately go, Steve's struggling with depression. Well, you did just go to the thing, so maybe let's not label him right now.
Exactly.
Let's give it a bit of time. So there's an accepted grief process or just processing process that you're going to go through.
Absolutely, and that's the principle of what we've tried to design. Is I come and see you in 4 days' time. You've had time to go back to your normal life, to eat, to sleep, to talk to your family, to process. Go to the gym, exercise. Because we always say to people on the PID, don't make any life-changing decisions. If you were going to the gym tomorrow, go to the gym tomorrow type thing.
Keep your anchors in place.
Yeah. Unless you're too tired, whatever.
Yeah.
So in 4 days' time, we sit down and go, look, I'm just here. It's a critical incident debrief. We're just here for your well-being. And the script almost is, like, I understand you all went to an RTC 4 days ago. I'm not going to ask you specifically to tell me what happened there. If you choose to tell me, that's different. So I'm not asking you to relive it, but sometimes people will. But the idea is, how's everybody today? Has anybody got anything that's worrying them as of 3 o'clock today? And generally you'll find, because we've built that reputation, people will go, I haven't slept very well for 4 days. You go. So normally there's a hook you can get in and go, oh, thanks for telling me that. Well, that's normal. And the whole idea of the conversation is to go, well, most things or everything you're feeling is normal. So you just normalise the room.
Okay.
Because we talk about, we all experience something beyond the normal range of expectations is the phrase we use. And we got it from somewhere. It's not normal for me and you to turn out from a fire station and cut a dead person out of a car.
No.
We might normalise it, but to 95% of the world, that's not a normal situation. So we should...
Even to a career firefighter, still, they might only do it once a year, once a decade now. So
we shouldn't try and normalise the reaction. It's an interesting cognitive thing to go, it's okay that affects you, but it's also okay if it doesn't.
Yeah.
I've seen hundreds of firefighters go, It hasn't bothered me for 4 days, Steve. I'm used to it. You go, okay, brilliant. That's how you cope. This firefighter is going, I haven't slept properly for 2 days. Okay, that's how you cope. It's most likely to get better. So the idea of the critical incident debrief is just a conversation to go, who's feeling what? And sometimes people will share, because the firefighter will go, I don't feel very well. And this person will go, well, neither did I, actually. I'm glad you said that. So it's that shared peer support.
Okay.
And you end it by going, look, everything you're all feeling is perfectly normal. It should dissipate over sort of 4 to 6 weeks. If it doesn't, go and ask the experts. So I always finish with, look, I'm not clinically trained. I'm not a counsellor. I'm not a psychotherapist or whatever. If you need some help after a few weeks, go and ask for it. Or ring me and I'll show you where the help is. So it's just
So is the ball left in their court then?
Yeah, for me, it was always try to recreate the sitting round the bar with a pint conversation to go in.
When you go, how are you dressed?
I try, in the old days, I would try and go out of uniform.
Yeah, it's important.
Or symbolically take your rank markings. It doesn't matter so much now. People know me now for what I do, so it doesn't matter.
But to some people, they don't know.
Yeah.
And,
and we're all in black t-shirts now. So.
Oh, good. Does your service not have...
We do on our white shirts, but we don't wear them very often.
Do the crews still wear blue?
No, they all wear black polo shirts with some rank markings on. But we always try and set it up.
What rank do they change shirts?
Everybody wears black t-shirts now or white shirts in our organisation.
Oh, wicked. Okay.
Yeah. But I always try and go, look, I'm not here for rank. I'm Steve. I'm a group commander, but I'm here for this. Yeah. And all the people that do the critical incident debrief are volunteers.
Ah.
So we make that specific. We're not here for anything else other than is everybody all right?
You know, when you're looking for people that support on these critical incident debriefs, or when it first got floated, what was the process of selecting the people that did it? Because some people might go, hey, Steve, I'm great at that. And everyone goes, you're a little bit empathetically inept, to be honest with you.
I think,
you're a bit of a social cluster.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not involved in the recruitment of it nowadays. You know, ever since I had that break.
Because not everybody's good at it.
No, exactly. You know, our wellbeing section lead on it now. But back in the day, it was people went on the course, and when we used to do the Mitchell model, you just applied and got on it. We've got more of I think the wellbeing section have set up a bit of a process now where if you applied, Pete, we'd get you to have a session with a counsellor or someone just to understand whether you are...
It's not a paid enhancement, I imagine, is it?
No, it's not paid
it's not a pass, fail. No. Oh, God, I didn't get a promotion. Well, it's not a promotion, mate. It's just to have you got that skill set to offer that support. Yeah,
we deliberately years ago went away from not being a paid role.
Good.
Because it attracts the wrong people.
Yes.
So
either trying to do it for pay or trying to do it for promotion. Yeah. And you're like, that's not what this is about. This is for them, not them like they're different from us, but this is for the external. Yeah. Yes, you will, I'm sure, get some development from it, but you want to go into it with a mindset of, well, actually, it's a bit like your electrician analogy. I've actually got a keen interest in this thing, so I could probably use that skill set here, rather than somebody going, never been interested in that, but it might help me, so I'll go on the course.
Yeah.
Oh, Jesus,
and we've got a solid cohort of volunteers, but the whole point of it is just to normalise, say to the fight boys, fear, guilt, anger, betrayal, these are the things you might be feeling, and guess what? They're all normal. So it's just a chat and a normalisation, but wrapped up in a whole host of making them feel safe to go, I don't feel very well. I haven't slept for 4 days. Because some of them will have gone home at 9 o'clock on the Monday morning and not had anyone to talk to for 4 days.
Yes, again, when we reflect back on that isolation analogy, some people won't have had, some people might have relied on going to five-a-side football on the Wednesday. Some people may do none of that. Yeah. They might live alone with their cat.
And during COVID, they couldn't go to 5 o'clock on a Wednesday football.
Absolutely.
Hey folks, just a reminder that we actually do giveaways to our listeners pretty much every single month. So a quick reminder of some of the things you can get your hands on for free as a listener of the Firefighters podcast. With our partnership hikes, you can get a pair of their Connexus Go GTX or their Nature GTX. We give away a pair of these every single month on the podcast to one of the listeners. You need to head over to one of our social media platforms and check out the competition giveaway. Also with our partnership in Tallyman, you can get 2 personalized BA tallies with your name inscribed and the podcast on the back. Also really excited to tell you about our new partnership with Rosenbauer, who will be giving away a pair of their Boros B4 firefighting boots once every quarter with the podcast for the rest of 2022. This is honestly one of my favorite parts of the podcast, when we're literally giving away stuff for free from people who recognize what we're trying to do and the authenticity that we bring to the market. So head over to our social media platforms and check out some of those giveaways. A big thanks once again to Hikes, Tallyman and Rosenbauer for choosing to be part of the podcast. Now back to the show.
It was just interesting that you you wanted to talk to me about my thoughts on Stoicism, because I read a lot of stuff. During lockdown, I started to listen to. There was a Lee Mack podcast. I can't believe it's not Buddha. Which so I'm
what? There's a number of comedians who are really fascinating.
Yeah, so it's Lee Mack and his mate. I think his name's is it Neil or Ian? I can't remember. They did it because they'd got nothing else to do in lockdown. But that led me down the route of reading a lot of Buddhism. I mean, I'm not entirely a bit religious. I haven't got a faith in anything, but. It's interesting to see the similarities between Buddhism and Stoicism and Christianity. So, a
lot of the themes are the same.
Yeah,
I find it hard to talk about that and not appear condescending or disrespectful, because it's a very emotive subject for a lot of people. But I always say that I'm not remotely religious, but I love the idea of it, and what I mean by that is the shared moral values, the community aspect to it. Look, if you go to a place once a week and do a thing, and as a result of doing the thing, it makes it, you feel like it's a better version of you, and it manifests the best version of you. You go out into society, you go back home, and you exhibit the best parts of you, or it makes you want to be more empathetic, more accepting. A lot of the values cross over. They bleed over into so many aspects of society. So I really love what it is. And if you're not religious, I hope you do have something like religion in your life. For me, fire service is probably it, to be honest.
Exactly. I'm not religious, and I never have been. Although, like you, if someone has a faith in something, then I admire that commitment to that faith. One of my close friends from the fire service is a devout Muslim. He's training up to be an imam, and I had a few days away with him, and I pummeled him endlessly with questions about Islam, and he was quite happy to answer, because my brain was like, tell me about this, tell me about that. And it was fascinating that his commitment to Islam is so devout that it's not on a different level.
There's loads of books as well. It's not like Christianity. There's like one. There's loads of books.
And I couldn't understand some of it, but he was quite happy to answer. So, a bit like yourself, if anyone's got a commitment to a faith, I'm like, fair play to you. Because,
absolutely.
I try to be that committed to Stoicism, but as I've said, I fail regularly.
But I would imagine, speaking, again, running from my personal opinion, when I have conversations with people who are deeply religious, they feel an element of, you're never going to achieve it. It's that thing that the journey never ends. It's at the end of life, you would put on the scales. Yeah. And how did you live? You know what I mean? There's always going to be a little bit of, because you did something with the best, they say the road to hell is paved with good intentions. You did the best of intention thing and you got it wrong, or you emotionally, physically hurt someone or hurt yourself. But on balance, where do you sit? And I see so much of that in the emergency services, certainly when we look at the roles of the police officers and stuff like that. Yeah. Where's the intention? The intention is good. I believe, anyway, from working with colleagues like our brothers and sisters in their services, the intention is good. But we can get lost so much sometimes and religion is see this. It's used, it's a tool at times. It can be used for good or evil. We have to be very conscious of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I wanted to ask you, because I was reading one of the other blogs the other day, and it was in and around children's school meals, and I know it went off in several directions. One of the lovely things that I remember reading in it was that you'd put like a flow diagram in there as well. It was like, if this, then that, if this. And the overwhelming takeaway for me, and we sort of discussed it a little bit already, is that analogy of, if the child needs feeding, is that the right thing to do? Then it doesn't matter whose fault it is. It doesn't matter their socioeconomic level of which they've come from. And this ties into our conversation, I promise. But the responsibility now lies with you. If someone delivers a child on my doorstep, it's right or it's wrong or it's horrible, but whose responsibility is it? It's now mine. And I see that when I look at the emergency services, people in your level of leadership, whatever's come and gone before or wherever we are right now, and that's what speaks so much to Stoicism about control the controllables. It's now our responsibility. Yeah. So how do we create an environment so that the next decade in the emergency services, doesn't matter where we are right now, but it's our responsibility, and we're going through so much recruitment in the UK especially, what bits do we need to keep? And how do we embrace the fact that it's now our responsibility to try and make the next decade a place where people want to be part of the emergency services? Yeah,
it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because, as I said earlier, the fire has not changed really. Car crashes are actually, RTCs are far better now than they ever were. People survive stuff that they weren't going to survive when me and you joined, and you can only thank technology for that. So our job has changed, tenfold.
Oh yeah.
Still put the wet stuff on the hot stuff to put the fire out. It is that simple. The science has not really changed. How we approach it has changed a little bit. The equipment we have is much better. RTC, we save all lives, you know. Yeah. Can we clear the airway? Can we keep them alive long enough to get them to definitive medical care? I always try and say to firefighters, we don't generally save people at the side of the road. No. We get them out quick enough for somebody with far greater knowledge than us.
We get them onto the next level of the survival chain.
To save them. So that bit hasn't changed, but we've got to change and adapt as we are doing this 21st century public servant. You know, we've got to be better at the upstream firefighting.
Yes.
I used to sit in council meetings when I was in community safety and said, you know, I think in our service we were knocking 27,000 doors a year, something stupid like that. Now there's no one else that can get through that many doors. No. And I put my fire service t-shirt on and you'll probably let me in. I used to say to people, we have got to be better at using that access we have to the public.
Massive USP.
So we're better at safeguarding now. You know, we have safeguarding processes where we can make safeguarding alerts. But what else can we do?
Because of that role and because of that identity we have in communities. Yeah. And again, it doesn't matter whose fault it is, but it's our responsibility. We have access. Yeah. People trust, and if we just go quiet and say, I only want to deal with fires, we're going to lose that, and we're going to throw out one of the greatest things about the role of a firefighter in our community is something I think it's hard to fully articulate the value that can add to so many things.
Yeah, I mean, no, a lot of kids will still say they want to be a firefighter. Yeah. And that's our cell that we have, males and females and all races. You know, we're getting better at recruiting people from, you know, underrepresented groups, but actually we've got to get back to, and that, coming out of COVID, during COVID it was hard, but for me, we've got to start opening up fire stations again. We've got to get back into physical school visits. And I know it's tough and we're going to struggle as we come out of COVID, because that's when we've got access to those kids. And when you've got access to the kids, you've got access to the parents, and you can influence parents in their house at whatever level. Yeah. And then we can start talking about healthy eating, and we can talk about anything. We can't solve some of society's problems, but we have access to certainly try. And that's the new age of firefighting for me. You know, police officers now are 90%.
Do you think there's an appetite for that?
I think there is. I think it's the cost of it that's the problem, isn't it? I think we are so financially strapped for stuff. Our service has lost millions, you know, during the comprehensive spending review, and probably lose some more. So how do to do it, we've got to access more money somehow. Okay. But we've got to be clever enough to say, well, that pot of money over there, we can have some of that because we can do that. Yeah. We can do that social work bit, that low level.
Somebody's going to do these things. Here's a myriad of needs laid across the table. Yeah. These are the community's needs. And there's police are stood there, fire service stood there, private sector, care sector, whatever, and going, what do you want to pick up? So you're going to pick up law enforcement and, you know, antisocial behaviour, fire service. If you just pick one up, okay, show me the back of it. That's 5 tokens on it. So you get 5 tokens to doing that just one thing. And actually now you only get 3 tokens because there's less of it. We need to pick other things up. Yeah, we've got a choice. But if you don't get a choice, I always say you've got to make a plan. If you don't make a plan, you fit into somebody else's plan. And their plan might not be what you want to do. We're going to give you something to do. So get involved, get in the conversation and be part of the choice.
I agree. You said, there's a podcast I was listening to before I come, one of yours, where I think you said, or one of your guests said that if nothing changes, nothing changes. And or what did you say? People moan about there's no change, but then they moan about change.
Yeah, I can't remember the word. 2 things firefighters, they hate the way things are and they hate change.
Yeah, but as a modern fire service, if we don't change, then we'll have far less fire engines and we'll just do 999 calls, and that's cheaper and easier to do. Yeah.
But even within that, you know, when I see this, and I don't want to get into a union conversation, but when I see this visceral pushback against, dude, let's do some more of the NHS stuff. You know, let's go out to these critical red calls. And people are like, no, that's not us. What do you want to do then? Do you want to go and walk old people around the block? That's cool. Some people will love that. I would argue with your appetite for emergency situations, you might enjoy going to trauma and or that aspect of it more. I love it. I have a bias. My brother-in-law's paramedic. I do a lot of the workplace trainer stuff for trauma. So, okay, I'm a bias. But I would also like to think that most people would rather go to more emergencies than the other side.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I'm a paid-up FBU member, and I understand their slant on we're happy to do the extra work, but we do want some recognition for it and paying for it, you know, because as I say, otherwise...
But we will... Well, honestly, it's not guaranteed that we will, but the whole things on the table thing, pick another one up.
Yeah,
pick it up. I know that they're agreeing, like, well, what are you going to pay me before I pick it? I don't want to pick them all up and then you not pay me anything.
There's got to be some give and take
there. Yeah. Because that's it's a jarring relationship. And I'm not in the conversations. I'm not in the meetings.
No, neither am I, but I think we both recognise if we don't pick something up, then... You know, you could run most brigades probably on half the fire engines I've got now. If we just turn out to fires and RTCs, it's not a problem.
No, we don't want that.
But we don't want that, absolutely. We have a visible presence in the community that is rare other people have got. If I walk into a room with a police officer, the kids will talk to me before they talk to the police officer, generally.
Police officers, depending on their cultural background, their nature nurture, they will have a myriad of reactions to that uniform versus you.
Exactly, yeah. So... You know, we have to trade on that sort of view of the community of us. We have to find a way of trading.
And to be fair to the police officer, most of them also want to be firefighters.
You know, I'm not commenting.
I'm joking. I always love poking the bear with that one.
Although my son is about to join to be a police officer, ironically.
Sorry to hear that. No, and you know what? So we've had a few police constables on in the past. I've had a few paramedics on, and I love tipping my hat to and we're having a few more military personnel come on very soon to give us those insights, because I think there's so much to gain from looking outside of our own boxes, and I want to see these emergency services hubs. I might be like an absolute, but cost saving, blah 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 blah. But I think, you know, for us to get paramedics over to train with us, for us to get police officers, just to get police officers is nigh on impossible. Not because they're not interested, because they're so busy, but if we were on a station working together alongside police officers and ambulance workers on a day-to-day basis, we would be such a better service to the community. And I would enjoy it more, personally.
I agree.
More skill sets.
Yeah, I think we had these chats. I remember having these chats years ago about, like you say, this emergency hub with
What's
police.
stopping us doing it?
I don't know, and I think it's just because we have three distinct services, and perhaps they're not all willing to join together. But, you know, now you've got the inspectorate, and it's got to be a way forward. Now we don't need the amount of premises we've got. We don't need a fire station built how fire stations were built 30 years ago.
No, they're not going to be massive big things, bay stretches with kitchen facilities and blah, 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 unless you're willing to share them with somebody else.
Exactly. You look at, I think it's West Midlands Ambulance have like you know, if your ambulance is filthy, you drive it somewhere else, pick another ambulance up out the other end and drive it off. Same analogy could work for fire engines.
Of course it could.
You know,
yep.
It's dirty, park it there, get that one at the front, move your kit, and off you go.
Yeah, and just
that all costs far less once you've set it up, and it could be a way forward. I don't know. It'd be way beyond my time.
Yeah, I think it'd be way beyond your time. I sincerely hope I see some manifestation of that within our time. From my limited interpretations, and I'd love to have somebody on from the NHS to help me understand this more, is that by comparison, they are such a behemoth.
Yeah.
And to try and that people change around so much in those services, they have a shorter shorter career span. Yeah. You know, I think the average paramedic's like 5 years now, and then it's not too indifferent as you go up the ranks in our NHS.
No, I don't think it is. I think that's
short careers.
Yeah, and some of the problems we have in the fire service, you know, like I say, I've been in lots of council meetings, but you go to one meeting and then 3 months down the line, you've moved role and you've got to build those relationships again. I think as an organisations, as fire services, we've got to get better at that.
Yeah.
To say, you know, city councils don't work at the pace we work at.
Yeah.
And they don't want to see 3 different faces in 12 months. Because they're like, I've just built a relationship with Steve and he's gone now.
Yeah.
However, the beast that we need to feed is, well, Steve's got promoted. You know, it's an interesting...
And we're going to see that a lot in this next 3 or 4 years, because massive retirement. You know, you will leave us very soon, and I see this across all the services. That's why I'm so hungry to get these tools logged down and recorded, so that as we move forward, people can use this library and capture, because they're not going to learn these things. They're never going to sit down with Steve. They're never going to sit down with whoever, all of the different guests. So I want to create that library, because I'm desperate. I feel like I've got a half-life where someone's going to burn these books in like 5 years. Yeah. And I'm like, oh God, I need to read all the books. Oh my God, I'm going to lose it all. So I feel like it's like an anxiety in me sometimes, where I'm like, God, when these people are gone, they're gone. And we're going to lose all of that experience. We're going to lose all that knowledge.
Yeah,
I have a fear. I'm worried about it.
I think one of the ways we have to diversify is, so my son's just about to join the police on a degree entry program.
Okay.
And I know some fire services have got sort of non-uniform to, chief execs, that kind of stuff. I think we have to evolve into that.
Yeah.
We have to find a way of recruiting uniformed middle managers.
Yeah, we do.
At a different level.
Almost like the... it's not a student program, it's a... what do they call it?
It's like a graduate program.
Thank
type
you.
Thing, isn't it?
Yes, I think we need to look at having more of a graduate program style approach. And also because when you get to certain levels in services, it's less about you tremendous operational familiarity. You're working with systems, project, finances, and actually a lot of firefighters haven't had that level of development. Yeah. And for the best of intentions, they can make a lot of mistakes and waste a lot of money, not familiar with that. Or the Peter principle says you get to a point of where your skill set should be familiar with what you're doing, and so many people accidentally get pushed beyond that.
Promoted to one level beyond your capability, yeah.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I have a view, and I've said these out loud in my brigade sometimes, is that I think I could probably take a senior manager from somewhere and train them to run a 20-pump fire.
Yeah.
Because it's essentially just logistics and moving stuff around.
Yeah.
As long as the teams below me are trained to a high enough level, I don't need to understand fire behaviour. Yeah. Now, people have looked at me strange and go, really? I was like, well, you'd have to give me some time, but I reckon I could do it.
Definitely. Most definitely.
Maybe that's a retirement plan.
I'd love it. Well, we're going to see more of that. So I want to have some actionable, tangible things for people to take away. So I want to sort of close, A, with a few personal questions, but B, with speaking about, when we speak about the Stoic philosophy, when we think about self-awareness, when we think about daily habits that we've spoken about, what are some of the low-hanging fruit for people that perhaps don't have a desire to go away and do the reading, listen to the audiobooks? What are some actionables? We spoke about journaling, or what are some things that people could go, I love listening to Steve today, but how can I put some of that into place?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because I mean, some of the ancient Stoic reading, it's hard to interpret in a modern world. We've talked about Epictetus, and he's got a book. There's a book called Enchiridion, which is a very short book, but some of the passages are hard to interpret. Marcus Aurelius Meditations. If you're looking at reading someone like Ryan Holiday, there's a blog called The Daily Stoic. There's lots of daily things. But for me, in our world, it boils down to that dichotomy of control. There's things that will be in your control or out of your control. And if you just boil it down to, Pete doesn't like me. Okay, well, that's out of my control. So I don't need to worry about it. How can I change Pete's mind? Well, what's in my control is how I interact with Pete, how I try and influence him. That's in my control, so I'll focus on that. And everything you come across in your life, it's a dichotomy control. You can either control it or you can't. It's really brutal sometimes to go, well, I don't know how I'm going to do that, but that's the end of the day. That's the reflecting on, could I have done that better today? Yeah. Some people will journal it. I'll drive home from here and go, could I have done that better? Could I have said this? Could I have said that? Little things. One thing I do regularly now is if I'm driving somewhere, I won't have the radio. We're always in touch, aren't we, with everybody and everything. I will drive in silence sometimes.
That's nice.
Just turn the radio off and just enjoy the drive. Yeah. And then you've got to focus on the idiots cutting you up. But then you go, he's cut me up. I'm not going to react. So these are all that courage, temperance, justice and wisdom. Those 4 virtues every day you can go, well, the wisdom is not to react to that idiot that's just cut me up. Yeah. We'll sit in traffic and go, yeah, you can come out. I'll let you out. Because it's not affecting, that 10-second delay is not affecting my life. So I just try and do really, really simple things, but try and do them really well. Yeah. And wisdom, you just have the wisdom to go, okay, I'm not going to react. Yeah, you're an idiot. Okay. But are you an idiot? Or is just my view of you makes you an idiot type thing? And I go, just think about it. So there's
lots. And in a year's time, in a week's time, in an hour's time, is what's happening right now going to matter? Yeah.
And I listened to a blog the other day, and there's one about, I can't remember the blog now, but it's about if you see your 80-year life as an 80-mile road, okay? So it's in 80 sections. Each section of that road is a year, and each section of that year is 365 days. That little problem, that person that's cut you up today is just a piece of gravel on that bit of that road. And you go, why are you letting that affect you today? Yeah. Because it's literally that blip in your life. And one of my blogs is called "What a Time to Be Alive." Yeah. There's no better side.
Oh my God, you're so right.
The amount of luck that's had to happen for me and you to be sat here today doing this is beyond comprehension. So should we worry about it? It's like, say I leave here now, and for some reason this 2-hour recording don't
say
work.
That. I always scared to death about it. That's why I constantly glance at it.
However,
it's happened before.
Yeah. However,
oh my God.
you would have a proper meltdown and go, really though? Is it actually?
It's happened. I felt so bad.
Yeah, but you'd have to ring me up and go, Steve, can you come back? And I go, yeah, of course I can. So, we make these things into massive problems, and I still do it. I'm not saying I'm perfect, because if my wife's listening to this, she'll be going, really?
Yeah.
I make massive problems out of minor things, and you go, right, have a word of yourself and just chill. Is it in your control? Yes. Right, do something about it. Is it out of your control? Yes. Leave it alone.
I saw a wonderful memes or whatever they are the other day, when it was a picture of like the galaxy or something. And then it had the tiny little dot and said, this is reality or whatever. This is you crying in the shower, thinking about the meeting that you went to yesterday.
Exactly.
You know, like, dude. Yeah. And I love that. And it's so hard, though. It's so hard to get out of your blog. We've spoken so much about your blog, and I know you've just launched your podcast as well. How can people learn more about you? How can people engage with you? How can they go and read a little bit more of this and benefit? Where's the best places to see?
So the blog's called Leading Into the Fire, and it's on WordPress. So leadingintothe-fire.wordpress.com. I've just set up, there is a YouTube channel, there's nothing on it, but please follow it, because that just helps.
Absolutely.
The podcast is called Talking Blues and Twos. I've literally only done an intro episode, and I'm trying to get some guests. So leadingintothe-fire@gmail.com. If you want to be a guest, it will be trying to talk about how we in the blue light services react to things and normalising that. So it will be different to your podcast, as in, I'm not going to talk technical stuff. It will just be about, okay, so this has happened to you. How have you dealt with it? Because people will cope with things in different ways. One of my coping mechanisms is running, just because it stops me killing people. Essentially, is what I always say to people. But it sorts my brain out. I know you go to the gym, so that could be one of your coping mechanisms.
Keeps me sane.
Yeah, but if people just want to, find me on Instagram, email me, I'll talk to anybody about anything.
100%. We will put the links for all of that in there. Steve, we've spoke for over 2 hours there. I've absolutely loved it. Thank you so much for your time, your patience. I always say to people, we're not experts on the podcast. I'm certainly not. I always call it like learning out loud, because I'm not an expert, but I try and speak to people who are. And this is the thing, you've spoken before about raising your hand in the meeting, raising your hand in the... Have a conversation like this. You've adjusted me a few times, I've adjusted you a few times. That's the art we're losing, the art of conversation, the art of debate, and learning to speak about things that others will be challenged by. And you demonstrate that wonderfully today. Thank you for your time, brother.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah.
Firefighters Podcast is a global podcast seeking to develop, inspire and motivate the world of the emergency services operators. Through a series of wide-ranging conversations celebrating those within our sector, we seek to encourage and support this incredible group of people. It's brought to you by myself, operational firefighter Pete Wakefield, and I speak with individuals from all walks of life who I sincerely believe can add value to or develop those who have chosen this life path. Please support your emergency services wherever you are in the world, and thank you for listening.